Life as I saw it? A few words before I start. Besides telling about my early life, this memoir details a good deal of my service career. I was a civil servant all through my active life with transfers as an integral part of the service. As such, my discourse for that part of my life would comprise mostly of the matters connected with my service, and the experiences I gathered as I moved from place to place. But there again some important and interesting events might have been lost sight of, as I did not keep notes of day-to-day happenings. I had to depend mostly on my memory to recall the events. I don't know how far this life story, as it is, will evoke interest in general. I could only hope that it does not become boring and tedious. I have tried to be truthful within the ambit of decency in describing my life. My family background, my emotions, my attitude towards life, my views on modern society all have found their exact expressions here. I have neither suppressed my shortcomings and failures nor overemphasized my virtues and successes. My views on matters of general applicability are based on what I had seen or experienced in places where I had lived and may be at variance with the situation elsewhere. I have no intention of hurting any individual or group in ascribing my views on any of the matters here. This memoir is primarily for my relations and friends who might know through it things they don't know about me, my family, and my ancestors. I have used internet materials, including those from Wikipedia, here and there in this discourse to describe some historical events, explain matters of importance or importance of places and personalities. I believe there is something to learn from the life of everyone. It would be worth the labor if someone learns something from my life too. I dedicate this memoir to those who may be interested in going through it. I am grateful to all my friends who have come to my help at some stage or other of my life. I could name only a few in the course of my memoir, but there are many more who have helped me one way or the other. About myself, a synopsis. I take pride in saying that I am a Sylheti Bengali. In my early childhood, we had lost our roots like hundreds and thousands of others on whom the hatchet of the partition of Bengal had fallen. I had to fight my way up through the ladder of life to finally become a civil servant. As a man grew up in poverty, with no worth mentioning background, it was indeed a blessing for me to have turned up as a righteous person with a mindset to work with honesty, sincerity, and integrity. In my long career of public service, I had never succumbed to pressure or threat in the discharge of my duties, had always tried to give justice and resisted extraneous interference, political or otherwise, where it involved public interest. I had worked without fear or favor. For these traits of my character, I am indebted to the environment in which I grew up and the people who had contributed to that. I had a brilliant academic career and a great potentiality but could not get to the place I should have because of the circumstances standing in my way, which I did not have the means to circumvent. I had the brains, but not the money, couldn't go ahead with the academic pursuits of my choice at the institutes of excellence where I had secured my entry. In all probability, I could have followed my academic pursuits as I had desired if we were not displaced from our homeland Sylhet to become refugees. The uprooting had made us homeless, we were to leave our ancestral house as it is. My father could not acquire any house or land since leaving the ancestral home, which finally went to some citizens of the newly formed country without any dividend to us. We moved like nomads from one rented house to another. In my childhood and the better part of teens, I along with others of the family had to fight hard against poverty while pursuing my mission of getting a firm footing for the future. Sylhet, our homeland, was a wealthy district of Bengal Presidency in early periods, a district that had delivered personalities of extraordinary genii from time to time. We were displaced from there as a result of its annexation to erstwhile East Bengal, later East Pakistan and now Bangladesh, following the referendum immediately preceding the partition of India. It was due to the farsightedness of my father that we did not have to face the onslaught of communal riots, though many of our relations fell victim to it, one way or another. My father had come over to India well in time to save our lives. We had crossed over almost empty-handed, counting only on the job of a printing press manager my father had secured prior to leaving our native place. Later, My father had established a small printing press at a place Horhat in Upper Assam with refugee rehabilitation loan of 5,000 rupees from the government of Assam. There, in the press, I had worked hard to help father to earn our livelihood. But our woes did not end there. We again had to leave, though temporarily, the place we had settled in Assam because of a large-scale linguistic disturbance. The small business of the printing press my father had established after much efforts, had suffered irrevocably due to this. Because of the independence movement of Nagas in NEFA, Northeast Frontier Agency, the quantum of orders for printing from Tunsang, Mokachung, and the adjoining areas that used to come to our press had already lessened. In consequence, income from our press had gone down appreciably. With the closure of the press as a result of our being forced to leave the place, the only source of income for sustaining the family dried up. These unfavorable situations had adversely affected my education and had created in me a confused mental state, where I always had at the back of my mind, a threat of financial handicap to complete my academic course. These, and some other factors acting in unison made me leave the institutes of excellence I had mentioned above. Once had been a regular companion of ours and of our relations who had migrated later. Our family had passed through many ups and downs and at times, we had been living hand to mouth. But for my father's tenacity and ruggedness and our strong will to stand up in life, we would have been swept away. As I have already said, I had to toil hard from early childhood to help my father and the family. My brother, too, had his own share of suffering. My sisters and their families and some of our maternal uncles suffered still worse. But Silhidis are born fighters, as Silhidis, we fought our way to life. It was a struggle for existence, and like any other struggle, here too some won and some lost. Win or loss apart, this struggle was forced upon us by a political gamble in which we, the Silhidi Hindus, were offered as the bait along with our homeland. In my later life as a civil servant, I had come across incidents and situations, political and otherwise, where I had my part to play. I had acted on these occasions at the dictate of my conscience, which had always directed me to follow the path of honesty, justice, and impartiality. For going against the tide, I had, at times, suffered in the service career too. It has been inescapable to include the details of my service career while describing my life. I feel one's personality is better exposed through activities in the service career. Lastly, I have a full-fledged website titled, A Tale of a Silhidi Refugee, which presents, besides my life story, travel videos, travelogues, photo albums, family profile, all about my friends and relations, and things I find interest in. I take this opportunity to say that I had a fair share of interesting events in my official life like any other administrator. Some of these I have discussed here. My profile summary. Presently leading a retired life after having served in various administrative capacities as a civil servant for more than 35 years. Basically, studious, and organized, apt in computer handling and online activities. Have a keen desire to learn new things. This urge had made me learn the work of a printing press in my very childhood and later to acquire the aptitude in driving cars and handling the computer and the internet. These were all by my own efforts. I did not have institutional training in any of these. Believe in plain living and high thinking. As already said, have a brilliant academic record behind. Birth. Born in a place called Sylhet presently in Bangladesh on the 4th of February 1943. Official date of birth is, however, February 5, 1943. Displaced from the homeland consequent on annexation of Sylhet to East Bengal, later East Pakistan and now Bangladesh, and the partition of India. Brought up at Horhat in the state of Assam in an ambience of privation. Education. Schooling at Horhat except for a very short period at the primary level at Silchar in Assam. Awarded scholarship for the first time in life in ME examination in 1956 when in class 6. Passed the matriculation examination in 1960 from Lakshmi Union High School, Horhat having stood first in order of merit in the Guwahati University. As people say, I was the first ever Bengali student to have stood first in that examination. Passed intermediate science in 1962 and graduation with maths, Hans, in 1964 from St. Anthony's College, Shillong having ranked first in the ISC and securing first class in graduation, none other having secured first class in the subject that year. Post-graduation from Calcutta University in Applied Mathematics while in service. Changed various institutions, including Presidency College, IIT Kutgapur and Yadavpur University, and disciplines in engineering and mathematics in academic life. Service, joined West Bengal Civil Service, Executive, on December 4, 1967 having stood first in order of merit in the said Civil Services examination. Served in various administrative capacities in regulatory, revenue and developmental wings at different places in West Bengal, including Raj Bhawan and Writers' Buildings. Joined Indian Administrative Service on promotion in 1995 after foregoing promotion under compelling circumstances at the first instance in 1992 and then again in 1993. Facts and circumstances leading to the entry in IAS in 1995 has been described later in this memoir. Couldn't sit for the All India Civil Services examination for direct entry to IAS or other All India services due to age bar. Retired from service on February 28, 2003. Service and settlement, West Bengal. Some key attributes of character. Nature, reserved and soft-spoken outside the ambit of the family. Intensely romantic and emotional by nature, love for someone grew in me as early as in early puberty, though it could never be made known to the one for whom it grew. I love the past comes alive in my imagination. My oneness with those bygone days inspired me to write my life story. To me, the past was soft and charming, while the present is hard and dry. That, of course, does not mean I live in the past. Being in the present, I try to keep my life purposeful by frequent travels and engagement in creative activities. Hobbies, reading, driving, working on the computer and photography. Since I became well versed in the computer and the internet, my reading has been mostly limited to electronic materials, though at times, I read printed books too. I have a keen interest in photography and have been working on it since the late 1980s, first with the traditional camera and then with the digital point-and-shoot camera. In October 2016, I acquired a Nikon DSLR camera and presently working with it. An album on some of my decent shots is available at http://img.gg/h9sil6s. Likes, touring in forests, hills, historical places, and seasides. Descriptions, photos, and videos of most of the trips I have made so far are available in the related pages of my website in travel videos and travelogues. Dislikes, hypocrisy, insensitivity, sycophancy, and untruthfulness. Mottos, uprightness, plain living and high thinking, honesty is the best policy and spend where you must. Strength, farsightedness, honesty and integrity and sincerity of purpose. Weakness, strong likes and dislikes, rigidity of character, sentimentalism, egotism, and craze for beauty. Religious view, not an atheist in the true sense of the term but does not believe in rituals. Decry superstition. I do not believe in destiny. To the contrary, I subscribe to the aphorism Udayagi Nam Purusha Singam Upati Lakshmi and tried to adopt it in my life. Whatever success I had attained, was because of my hard labor and enterprise. Having said that, I wonder if certain unknown forces had not been at play behind a series of events of my life, viz. Repeated changes of the institutions and the disciplines for study during academic career, circumstances leading to my entry to service, and later to my marriage. Even the acquisition of a flat at Salt Lake would not have been possible for me if certain unexpected events had not taken place. The facts will reveal in the course of my life story presented here. I still feel the presence of this force, though at times, while it restrains harms from coming my way in the course of my day-to-day living. Attitude, liberal, has no bias towards any community, does not believe in casteism. Political view, non-political. My preferred branch in civil service, my service career was almost equally divided between development and regulatory administration. I, however, found more pleasure in the development work, where one works nearer the masses and can deliver the goods directly to them. In this branch of the administration, one also has the satisfaction of building up new things. The development branch, however, is not exclusive of regulatory measures. Fascination, music has always held a fascination for me. I can't sing myself, but I love listening to music in idle times, and when in a romantic or pensive mood. I have a collection of 4,933 songs in Bengali, Hindi and English, in my electronic music library. Of 1997 Bengali songs I have, 835 are Rabindra Sangeet, including dance dramas. My collection of 2,614 Hindi songs includes Bollywood classics, ghazals, and immortal songs from pre-1960s to date. When I feel sad, I play my favorite songs and then I don't feel so bad. I love working on the computer with the music turned on. To whom I owe, obviously, I owe the most to my parents who brought me to this world and stood by me in all situations till I grew up, to take charge of myself. My gratitude goes to all my teachers, in the school, and in the college, who by their words, manners, and teachings helped in bringing out the best in me. I am also grateful to the authorities of St. Anthony's College, Shillong for providing me free education in the college and free board and lodging in the college hostel for the entire course of 4 years. I stayed and studied there. About my family. My family consists of myself, my wife Svapna alias Ajita and 2 married daughters Ananditha alias Maman and Anasua alias Jilmil. I have a lovely 10-year-old grandson Shlok, born April 15, 2010, from daughter Anasua. Elder daughter, CA Intermediate. Persistent persuasions to make her complete the CA failed. Worked as accountant in different organizations up to 2010. Now a housewife. Elder son-in-law, an engineer, does freelance consultancy, has a small factory of machine tools. Younger daughter, MBA in Human Resources. Had registered for company secretary course after graduation in accountancy, but never made any effort to pursue that. Worked in different organizations till her pregnancy and birth of a son in 2010. Had started an enterprise with some of her friends in 2015 and had run it for about a year. Presently a housewife devoting full time after the son. Younger son-in-law, runs a business on pollution control devices. My grandson Shlok is presently, 2020, reading in class 5. He is intelligent, good-natured, and has developed a knack for study. On the whole he has been doing well so far. I have a good lot of relations from my maternal and sibling side as also from wife's side. Lineage and migration. I was born in a district town called Sylhet, also known as Jalalabad by its old name, in undivided India, later East Pakistan and now Bangladesh. The city situated on the bank of the river Surma had been a prominent Islamic spiritual center and home to numerous Sufi shrines. It hosted the 14th century mausoleums of Shah Jalal and Shah Farhan. I vaguely remember I had once visited the Dargah of Shah Jalal with my mother in my early childhood. Sylhet was a wealthy district of Bengal Presidency rich in tea gardens, rainforests, and river valleys. It was given away to erstwhile East Pakistan by an evil contrivance of the British government where the then prominent political leaders of Assam had also a part to play. In consequence, we had lost our ancestral home and solvency, and our married sisters who had well-to-do landowning families in the rural areas of the Sylhet division became almost paupers. We thus lost our roots and became refugees. Here is more to know about the loss of our homeland, Sylhet, and the emergence of a deterritorialized Sylheti identity in India. Sylhet was brought under the umbrella of Assam by the British in 1874 to make that state economically viable and self-sustaining. Neither, the Assamese-speaking state of Assam, nor the Bengali-speaking district of Sylhet, which had traditionally been a part of East Bengal having occupied its eastern fringes, welcomed this coming together. The people of these two areas had divergent linguistic and cultural identities. The vibrant tea-growing district of Sylhet was bordered by Tripura in the east and the southern Assam districts in the north. It was separated from the neighboring Assamese-speaking heartland of the Brahmaputra Valley by the mountainous regions of North Kachar and Jaintia Hills. With the inclusion of Sylhet in Assam, Sylhet became a neighboring district to Kachar of Assam. These two districts, Sylhet and Kachar, mostly speaking the same Bengali dialect, popularly known as Sylheti, now formed a new Surma Valley, with a combination of the existing Barak Valley and the new Surma Valley coming with inclusion of Sylhet, behind the towering mountainous region of Assam. Sylhet had an area of 5,440 square miles. Since 1874 it had 5 subdivisions, each of the subdivisions having several thanas within its jurisdiction. A look at the pre-colonial history of Surma Valley will be enough to show that Sylhet was an integral part of Bengal in pre-colonial and medieval periods. Sylhet was thus tied with Bengal in ethnicity, language, geography, and history for ages. Sylheti Hindus demanded their return to culturally akin and more advanced Bengal for several years after 1874. Sylheti Muslims, on the other hand, preferred to stay back in Assam with their leaders, believing that they would, by their sheer numbers, be able to help their minority Assamese brothers to exercise more influence and political powers. Since its inclusion in Assam in 1874, the indigenous Assamese, too, had always wanted Sylhet to be separated. They considered the English-educated Sylheti Hindus not only as competitors for jobs but also as cultural threats, particularly to their economically weak middle class. Indigenous Assamese had also been trying to make the state their own with a homogeneous build under the support of the British. Ironically, when the opportunity for return of Sylhet to East Bengal, later East Pakistan, came in 1947, both the Hindus and the Muslims of Sylhet reversed their earlier positions. Sylheti Hindus now demanded to stay back in Assam while the Muslims wanted to separate. The Mountbatten Plan hatched on June 3, 1947, which inter alia provided for referendum for Sylhet, came into effect. But surprisingly, the decision to hold referendum was declared only 3 days, on 3 July 1947, before it was due to be held. H.C. Stock was declared as the commissioner of referendum. The event was therefore held in great haste without practically no time for making the majority of the illiterate population aware of the process, the legal requirements and implication of their choice. The referendum was held on the 6th and the 7th of July 1947. In the referendum, a total of 239,619 votes were cast for joining East Pakistan, and 184,041 for remaining in Assam, India. Following the outcome of referendum, most of the Sylhet district was ceded to East Pakistan. Only 3.5 thanas including the subdivision of Karimgunj came to Assam/India. Since the partition of India, a large number of Sylheti Hindus from the ceded parts of Sylhet district continued coming over to India due to religious persecution. Most of them settled in Indian northeast, particularly in southern Assam, where they had established considerable economic and social networks during the period 1874 to 1947 when Sylhet had been a part of Assam. Despite considerable indigenous opposition to refugee settlement, these displaced people from ceded parts of Sylhet formed minority pockets withstanding powerful challenges by assimilative drives from time to time. As more and more migrants came and settled there over the period, there gradually emerged a deterritorialist Sylheti identity. Sylhet and Sylhetiness today continue to live in many social, cultural, and political forms in different parts of Assam, which is the largest Sylheti settlement in India. The dream of the Assamese people to form a linguistically homogeneous homeland for themselves was thus not realized by the separation of Sylhet from Assam, as was expected. Coming back to where I had started about my birth and lineage, I may state, I didn't know the exact date of my birth until I had created my first website, 2007-08. My mother did not have much of formal education. She could not tell the year of my birth but used to say, I was born during the World War in a blackout night on the 22nd Magha by the Bengali calendar, and the day was a Thursday. My age was recorded in the matriculation certificate as 17 years 1 month as on the first day of March, 1960. Based on this fact, and a declaration on the exact date of birth made by me, the government later fixed my official date of birth as February 5, 1943. The date was arbitrary and had suddenly occurred to my mind when I was drafting the declaration. I could not be at rest without knowing my actual date of birth. My mother often mentioned that my eldest maternal uncle Ramakanta Das had got married on the very night I had been born. I asked my maternal cousin Rajith alias Monik about his father's, my maternal uncle's, date of marriage, but he did not know that. Unable to proceed from that angle, I tried to work it out from other related events of that time. As the birth was during the World War, which could not but be the Second World War, one surmised the year should be 1943 or 1944. It was then the question of finding English-Bengali bilingual calendars for those years. It was a hard task to get such calendars that old. I tried various sources but could not succeed. By disposition, I am not one to give up easily. I kept on the search. At long last, my tenacious efforts brought me success. While editing this document in my primary website, now defunct, for the first time, I surfed the internet for the Bengali calendar corresponding to the year 1943 and chanced upon a website from which I could find the combined calendars in English and Bengali for the months of Magha corresponding to February 1942, 1943, and 1944. Correlating the calendar for February 1943 with the data my mother had given in respect of my date of birth, I found that my actual date of birth was the 4th of February, 1943, corresponding to Magha 22, Thursday, 1349 BS. Curiously, my actual date of birth turned out to be so close to my official date of birth. My father was Saradacharan Das, and mother Sarojnalini Devi, nicknamed Kuki. They had 4 sons and 4 daughters, of whom I was the youngest. 4 of my brothers and sisters had died at a very young age. My father too, did not have much education. He was a non-metric. He was initially a contractor but later worked as a manager of a printing press. Our ancestral home, an unfinished Pakka building with a considerable expanse of vacant area, was at a place called Rainagar in Sylhet town. It was situated on a tila, hillock. As I remember, we had a big pond in front of our house on the flat land at the base of the hillock, on which situated the house, and an orchard of fruits and other kinds of trees in the backyard. During my recent visit to homeland Sylhet, December 2019, the once in a lifetime so far, I had been to the locality where I had spent some years of my early childhood since my birth. The area had undergone a metamorphic change. The tila, hillock, on which our house had stood and those on both sides of it with similar houses on them were all gone except the one standing opposite Rainagar Rajbari. Those tilas were now plain lands, marginally inclined here and there, with buildings standing on them. The pond that we had at the base of our tila could not be found anywhere around. According to local information, the pond had been filled up long back and buildings had been constructed there. I did not have the holding number and other related particulars of our ancestral house with me. I could not, therefore, find out the exact location where our ancestral home had once been, in spite of my best efforts. I had to return satisfied with the feeling that I could at least set foot on the soil I had once trod on in my early childhood. I have included a separate chapter on my homeland visit in this memoir to give some highlights of my beloved birthplace. My paternal grandfather was Dinanath Das and the great-grandfather Brohanath Das. I did not have the opportunity to see either of them. Nor do I have any information on them. I didn't also see my paternal grandmother and don't even know her name. My father had 2 brothers, the elder Barodacharan Das and the younger Basanta Das. He also had a sister Bharti Das. I remember to have seen only the elder brother of my father. He was a widower and had a partnership shop with one of his friends. Possibly, he was addicted to alcohol, though my father never drank. He suddenly died one night at the wee hours at our ancestral home after he returned from his workplace. I don't know anything about my father's younger brother or his sister. I came to know of their names from my elder sister. We had our maternal house in the same town of Sylhet in a locality called Daryapara. My maternal grandfather was Ramesh Chandra Das, whom I had seen. On our maternal side, we had many uncles, some of whom I had seen and distinctly remember. In my memory, there is none from our paternal side, save and except my father's elder brother. I have spoken about my maternal uncles and cousins in details in the chapter on maternal uncles and cousins. We had left our ancestral place just after the partition following the referendum on the annexation of Sylhet, maybe, by the end of 1947. My father had procured the job of a manager in a printing press in Silchar in Assam before we had left Sylhet. The press belonged to one Satindra Mohan Dev, the father of the Congress leader of the other day, Santosh Mohan Dev, a one-time MP and a central minister from Assam. We were four in the family at that time, viz., father, mother, my elder brother, and me. My brother had, however, stayed back in the maternal house in Sylhet to appear at his matriculation examination from Dhaka University. He later joined us in India. As we migrated, we became refugees and lost the affluence we had in the family earlier. Our property in land and house were left behind in Sylhet as it is. Later, these were treated as enemy property by the government of Pakistan. I learned from my cousins who lived in Sylhet that our said property in land and building had been occupied by the Muslims, who had built new buildings there. On migration, we stayed at Silchar in a small rented house in an alley opposite the railway station in a locality called Tarapur. My mother used to do all household chores by herself. I was around 4 or 5 years old at that time and was admitted in Class B, equivalent to present-day KG2, in a neighborhood school which possibly was run by the municipality. The school was opposite our house. I don't have much of a memory about Silchar. My only memories relate to the nightmarish days we spent there, when frightening reports of atrocities on and massacres of thousands of Hindus in East Pakistan reached us every day, during the early part of our stay. Once, during that period, I overheard my parents talking about an incident where all the Hindus in a train were reportedly killed on the bridge over the river Barab. People fleeing in fear of life and honor, who could make it to the side of the border, brought with them reports of odious incidents of murders, rapes, and other forms of atrocities every day. Our sisters and maternal uncles had stayed with their families in East Pakistan. The reports of these horrifying incidents added to our worries and anxieties for them. In the long run, none of our relations were, however, physically harmed, though most of them had to flee for life, leaving everything behind. My father did not stay in Silchar for long. After the turmoil of the partition was over, possibly in 1948 to 1949, he shifted to Horhat in Upper Assam. He again had the job of a manager at a modest salary in a local printing press under the management of a departmental store named Das & Co. there. Incidentally, Das & Co. was the first departmental store in the Northeast. I spent the whole of my childhood and the early youth in Horhat. I still cherish my memories of those years. I love to visit the place even at this late stage and make opportunities to do it. My last visit there had been in 2018. As of May 2020. My father couldn't acquire any land or house since leaving our ancestral home. We had always stayed in rented houses in Horhat, shifting from one house to another from time to time. In fact, we did not have any house of our own till my brother had acquired one in Silchar in the late 1970s, and still later, I had managed to get a flat on cooperative ownership at Salt Lake, Kolkata in mid-1990s. Brothers and sisters. As I have already stated, 4 of my brothers and sisters died in their early childhood. Amongst those dead were our eldest sister Safalai, a brother next to her Mrinal Kanthi, a brother younger to my then surviving elder brother, named Sisir, and a sister above me, Nivedita. When I was old enough to understand things, I had my only brother Krishnakanta Das nicknamed Kanta and sisters Bakul alias Kitty and Kameli alias Boda around. Both these sisters were older than my elder brother, Kameli being the eldest amongst us. They had been married much before we had migrated. I was the 8th child of my parents and the youngest. My father's elder brother Bharatacharan Das was a widower and did not leave behind any descendant. I have no knowledge about the families or descendants of my father's younger brother or of his only sister. My eldest brother-in-law was Narendra Nath Roy, and the next one was Rajni Mohan Roy. Both were from affluent landed class from the rural areas of Sylhet division, the names of their villages being Gobind Ganjay and Panatirtha, respectively. When we migrated after the partition, they stayed back as they were not ready to shift, leaving their property behind. There was also the question of finding a suitable job to support the family on this side of the border. Neither of them had the education, training, or orientation for any gainful employment. None of my sisters or brothers-in-law had gone beyond the school-level education. In spite of their attachment to their respective places, neither of them could, however, ultimately stay at his native place due to the communal disturbances frequenting their homeland. First came the younger of the two. I had learned from her that there had been a severe riot in their village Panatirtha, consequent on which they had to flee for life. She had been seriously ill with eclampsia at that time. There was no transport available to get them out. At long last, they somehow managed to have the transport and arrived at the Sutarkandi-Karimganj border. There they stayed in a camp for some days. My father had gone there to see my ailing sister. My sister was in a coma because of her illness, during which time ornaments on her body that she could carry while fleeing were stolen. In the camp, she regained her senses and finally moved out. They later went to Fulertal in the district of Kachar in Assam and settled there initially. They had reached India empty-handed and had to start now the battle for survival. My brother-in-law procured the job of a sales representative in a hair oil company named Abhoya Chemicals, which helped in keeping their body and soul together for some time. Later he, along with his family, shifted to Horhat, where we had been living. They had to face acute poverty from time to time, particularly when my brother-in-law did not have any regular job or income. At that time, my parents used to help them to the extent possible. My brother-in-law tried various jobs. He had also learned the work of a printing press from my father. He did, in fact, work in a press towards the later part of his life, after we had left Horhat. He was very committed to his family. My sister had suffered from very serious kinds of diseases on different occasions when they were in acute poverty. They had no money for treatment. My brother-in-law had left no stone unturned to secure free treatment for her. It was due to his untiring efforts that she could get proper treatment and survive on those occasions. My brother-in-law had great respect for my parents. He loved us too. My eldest sister Kameli and her family migrated a little later and settled at a place called Dilkush Basti on the bank of the river Barak, also in the district of Kachar. I am not aware of the circumstances under which they had to leave their native place, but it could not be anything but a threat to life. My brother-in-law had opened a small grocery shop and had constructed a kucha house on a piece of land purchased by him with the little money he could bring while fleeing from his home. Partition made them almost pauper. My brother-in-law was much older than my sister. He had led a comfortable life in his native place. He could not swim in unknown waters. Having been thrown out of his hearth and home, he was completely devastated and could not pull himself together to successfully fight the battle of survival in the land foreign to him. He did not live long after coming over to India. My widowed sister brought up her children, 3 sons and 2 daughters, at great pains, but could not give them education as she did not have the means. We could not also help her as she stayed at a place away from us, and we did not have the means to help her at a distant place. Both of my sisters on migrating to India had to fight a prolonged fight with poverty. Younger of the two, however, came out of the situation after her son grew up and could establish himself in business. She had 2 daughters and a son. All of them were now married with children and were well settled. Her grandson from the son's side, unfortunately, had died of cancer at his teens. Her son Ranju was left with a daughter whom he married off in July 2017. Her elder daughter Sabita has a son and a daughter, both of whom got married recently. As of 2017, Sabita lost her husband on March 20, 2020, at their native place Tigboi in Assam. My sister's younger daughter Namita too, has a son, a daughter, and a grandson from each. My brother-in-law died on January 23, 2010. My sister had continued to stay with her son at Mariani, Assam, and had breathed her last there on June 6, 2018, at the age of around 86. The probable cause of death was a massive heart attack. This sister of mine and her husband had been extremely fortunate in having a son and daughters like the ones they had. This son and the daughters were totally devoted to their parents. My sister and brother-in-law had been ailing for years, but could never complain of neglect, lack of treatment, or care. Their son, with occasional help from his sisters, did everything possible to reduce their sufferings and ensure proper treatment. I would do injustice if I don't mention about their daughter-in-law Mani, who took special care of them, while smilingly doing her odd jobs. My eldest sister lived in abject poverty all through her life since coming over to India and died a miserable death without even proper treatment. She had a prosperous household and had not to live such a wretched life or die in this manner but for the partition. I had heard from my mother that when my sister and brother-in-law came to visit us in the pre-partition days, they used to bring along a boatload of cereals, vegetables, and fruits with them. My sister left behind 3 sons and 2 daughters. Both these daughters were married, the elder one with 2 sons and a daughter. Of my sister's 3 sons Nandalal, Nantu, and Nikhil, all married, the eldest Nandalal died in 2010, and the next after him had died much earlier, leaving behind his widow and a son. Only the youngest Nikhil is now alive and lives with his second wife and a son from the first. He is now employed as a grade 4 staff with Central Water Works Department in Mizoram. None of these sons and daughters of my eldest sister could complete even the school-level education. Independence turned out to be a bane to those who fell victim to the partition. As a direct fallout of the partition, hundreds of thousands of the Hindus lost their lives and honor. Of those who survived and migrated later, many became paupers on migration. I lost contact with my eldest sister Kameli, whom I used to call Didi Babu, and her family after I had left Assam, first for pursuing my studies and then for service. I met them at times when I happened to be in Silchar, near which was the place they had lived. I had visited my eldest sister for the last time in 1972 when I was on a visit to Silchar, after my marriage. My sister was on her deathbed. She died in the last week of March 1972, on the very day I and my wife had started back for my workplace after spending my leave period at Silchar. My mother had also been with us at that time. Long after this, when I visited Assam in 2007, I made it a point to contact my eldest sister's children and refurbish my relationship with them. I acted accordingly and had my association re-established with them. It needed much effort to locate my sister's eldest daughter Sulekha, whom I had not seen since early 60s and had no contact with her. Sulekha, at that time, lived in Silchar with her husband and children but had no contact with any one of us, including my elder brother, who himself was a resident of Silchar. They, however, had later shifted to Guwahati. Unfortunately, I could not find my other niece Manju from the eldest sister, in spite of my best efforts. Both Sulekha and Manju had been very close to me. Both of them had stayed with us some time or other in their younger days. At long last, on the 21st of May 2020, I could contact my niece Manju over the phone, the number of which I had obtained after persistent efforts. She was now a widow, had a daughter and 3 sons, of whom the eldest was dead. The elder of the surviving sons and the daughter were married. My niece lived with her sons near Dimapur railway station at a place called D Colony. I, however, had regular contact with my other elder sister Bakul, whom I called Fuldi, and her family. All her children, viz., son Ranju and daughters Sabita and Namita, were, so to say, born before my eyes and were much attached to me, as they still are. My sister and her husband had shifted from Fulertal, the first place of their post-migration settlement, to Horhat, where we had been staying at that time. Her children were not born when they had first arrived at Horhat. Later, when my parents had relocated to Silchar to stay with my elder brother, they continued to live in Horhat. After my father had died, my mother used to go to stay with my elder sister at Horhat at times. On such occasions, I visited them while I was to take my mother to my place of work. Even otherwise, I visited them on some of their family occasions, like my niece's marriage. Even now, I visit them whenever I happen to be in Assam. Last time, as of May 2020, I had visited them in June 2018 when I had gone to attend the last rites of my deceased sister. My elder brother Krishnakanta Das had passed the matriculation examination from Dhaka University. As I have already said, he had stayed back in our maternal house at Sylhet for the said examination when we had migrated. Later, he joined us at Silchar or Horhat, I don't exactly remember, and did his graduation from Jagannath Barua College, Horhat. He did MA in Economics from Guwahati University. After post-graduation, he first joined Lakshmi Union High School, Horhat, as an assistant teacher and worked there for some time. Later, he shifted to Silchar and joined Gurucharun College as a lecturer in economics. He spent the rest of his service career there itself and retired as the head of the Department of Economics. He had 2 marriages, the first one being in mid-July 1969 when he had married Jarna Das of Allahabad. I had by then joined the service and was posted at Mekhliganj. I accompanied my brother to Allahabad for his marriage, along with 2 of our maternal uncles, Kutu Mama Radhikakanta Das and Meso Mosai Bhupenchandra Das, who was Aunt Ganga's husband, refer page on maternal uncles and cousins for profile, and a friend of my brother. I recall here, an interesting event relating to corruption, in the railways in those days. My brother had asked me to arrange for railway tickets for all of us from Howrah to Allahabad to attend his marriage. For this purpose, I had come to Calcutta a couple of days ahead of our program at Allahabad. The computers were not there in those days, and the sale of tickets with the reservation for upper classes used to be done manually at the station counters. There were 3 classes in the trains in those days, the first class, the second/inter class, and the third class. I could easily get the required number of tickets by the second class along with reservation from the Howrah station counter. But, after issuing the tickets, the counter clerk and the supervisor demanded some extra money for the work they had done. I refused to accede to their demand. I told them it was their duty, and they had not done me any favor. When they insisted, I disclosed my identity and told them that I was a magistrate and would see that they were charged under the Anti-Corruption Act. The moment they came to know of my identity, their demeanor completely changed. They became shaky, apologetic, and begged to be excused. People still had the fear of law. I left the matter at that and did not proceed further. Such petty corruption has ended, or at least been reduced to a minuscule, with the introduction of the computers and online booking of tickets. But a much larger scale of corruption, termed as scams involving big fishes and huge money, has since become endemic at the higher echelons of the society in almost every sphere. The country has become a haven for corrupt people. My brother's first wife having died at the time of childbirth in Nov 1972, he married again in mid-1973. He had a son by his second wife Savitri. His son Kalyan alias Raju became an engineer and was presently settled in Denver, USA, with his wife Soheli and son Rohit. He used to come to India once a year or once in 2 years to see his parents when they were alive. My brother had made a house of his own in Silchar and had settled there. He had visited his son in the USA a couple of times. We used to meet at times on such occasions when he would be in transit through Kolkata. My brother had died on February 6, 2010, due to a massive heart attack. Since then, his widow, my sister-in-law, had lived alone in the house my brother had acquired. She, too, had died here in her sleep, on the April 30, 2014 in the early morning. She had no relation around her when she had breathed her last. Since her death, the house became a liability for the US-based son. During my visit to Assam in 2007, after a span of 25 years, I had also visited Silchar and had stayed with my brother there for a week. That was our last stay together. My last visit to Silchar, as up to February 2020, was, from February 12, 2010 to February 20, 2010, for attending the last rites of my brother. I could not attend the last rites of my sister-in-law, Baudi, due to last-minute emergency at home. Since 2014, it had been a regular feature for me to visit Assam at least once a year. My itinerary in these visits excluded Silchar, as I had none there with whom I had been related even remotely. Silchar, which had once been home to a good number of my close relations, was now an abandoned place for me. It had given us shelter on more than one occasion. Though I had not stayed there for long, it was something of a sort of vacation resort for me. I conclude this chapter with my tribute to Silchar. Maternal uncles and cousins. As I have said earlier, we were much attached to our maternal side, more so, because of practically none being there, on the paternal side. Our maternal house was at Daryapara in Sylhet town, now a metropolitan city. Our maternal grandfather Ramesh Chandra Das had 2 marriages. He had a daughter and 2 sons from the first marriage and 3 sons and a daughter from the second. My mother was the eldest of them all. My grandfather kept a good number of cows and personally looked after them. He was so attached to the cows that he would not have his food until they were fed. I did not have the luck to see my mother's own mother. I had heard from my mother that her own mother had died when she, my mother, was very young, and her siblings were just kids. It was my mother who had brought up her brothers with the love and care of a mother. My maternal uncles, too, had great love and respect for my mother. I had a good lot of maternal uncles. The eldest was Ramakant Das, our Bara Mama, followed by Radhikakanta Das or Kutu Mama, Rishikesh Das or Rishi Mama, Sunil Mama and Ranu Mama. The first 2 were my mother's own brothers, and the other 3 were her step-brothers. My mother had also a step-sister named Ganga. Aunt Ganga had migrated to India with her family and settled in Karimgunj. All the brothers and sisters maintained a very cordial relation amongst themselves and had a mutual love for one another. My maternal grandfather had 3 younger brothers, Kiran, Kshidish, and Kailash. Kiran, too, had 2 marriages. He had a son, Kumud alias Botu by the first wife. He had 3 sons, Kanthibhusan alias Pukan, Makan and Saila, and 3 or 4 daughters, the eldest of whom was Prabha by his second wife. Of them, I remember to have seen Pukan Mama only once or twice, and that too in pre-partition days. I might have seen Makan and Saila Mama as well at that time, but my memory about them is completely clouded. There was another of my mother's cousins named Badal, who was the son of Kailash. I was very close to Kutu Mama and Botu Mama. None of these uncles is alive today. Of the maternal aunts, Pukan Mamima, Satyabhama Das, and Sunil Mamima, Malika Das, are the only 2 alive today, as far as I know. If I am not very wrong, I met Pukan Mamima, a widow then, for the first time during one of my many trips to Assam, March 2014. Bara Mama had a large family with 10 children. I remember to have spent some time of my early childhood with some of my cousins, Bara Mama's children, before we had migrated. They were Rajith alias Manik, Chandan, and Pradeep alias Pada. The rest of Bara Mama's children, my cousins, Reba, Shankar, Ranjan alias Siku, Daipu, Pankaj alias Bachu, Nandan and Simu, were all born after we had migrated to India. I still have regular contact with some of my cousins and their children. Years later, when I had been serving in Calcutta, I had the occasions to meet my two cousin sisters Reba and Simu, for the first time when they had visited us. In the pre-partition days and for some time thereafter, Bara Mama and Kutu Mama used to run a furniture shop at Zinda Bazaar in Sylhet and were quite affluent. I had visited the shop once or twice in my childhood. My mamas had a beautiful house provided with all amenities for a comfortable life. Sometimes after the partition, Bara Mama wound up the furniture shop and joined Malai Chowra Tea Garden near Sylhet town as a consultant. He was arrested and served the jail terms during the Bangladesh movement. Even before that, he had faced the wrath of the government of Pakistan and Muslim hoodlums on different occasions. Once, his family members were hounded by Muslim fanatics and would have been annihilated if caught, but somehow, they managed to escape. This, I had heard from my cousin Monik alias Rajith, the eldest son of Bara Mama, since deceased. Most of the sons and the daughters of Bara Mama and their families lived in Bangladesh till the other day. Of late, they have started migrating to the USA in batches. We had another couple of maternal uncles from my mother's maternal side. They were Runa Mama and Yahanu Mama, being the sons of our mother's maternal uncle Manindra Chandra Das. Manindra Chandra Das, whom we called Baradada, had migrated to India, and I had met him several times at Silchar after the partition. Runa Mama and Yahanu Mama had stayed back in Sylhet, and I have only a faint memory of them. They are both dead now. Manindra Chandra Das had a younger brother, my mother's younger maternal uncle. His name was Nripendranath Das. We called him Sadhu Dada. He was a bachelor and came to stay at Horhat some time after we had shifted there. Unlike his elder brother, he was a likable personality. I was quite close to him. He stayed at a place different from ours at Horhat and visited us often. Sadhu Dada used to do the varnishing work in a furniture shop. He had developed a severe kind of eczema on his palm and fingers towards the later part of his life. This could have been due to his varnishing activity. He died at Horhat after we had left the place. Much late in life, he had married the woman, a widow, who used to look after him and had, as far as my knowledge goes, a son from her. Long after the partition, when I had settled in service, Bara Mama came to visit us in Calcutta twice, the last time being in the mid-1980s when we were in the Minto Park government housing estate near Victoria Memorial in South Calcutta. My mother was alive then and was staying with me. Bara Mama had been working at that time as a consultant in Malai Chowra Tea Garden in Bangladesh. The first time he had come to visit us when we were in a rented house at Kasipur in North Calcutta. My youngest sister-in-law Shanti had been living with us at that time. Shanti took Bara Mama along to show around the places. The eldest of my cousins, the eldest son of Bara Mama, Rajith alias Monik, was a few months younger than me. We were very close and friendly with each other. In our childhood, we had even shared food from the same plate. I had met him for the first time after the partition more than a decade after we had left Sylhet on migration. He had come to visit us at Horhat with Kutu Mama, my mother's own youngest brother. It was 1960, and I had just completed my matriculation examination. Monik had then stayed with us for some time. We had gleefully spent those few days and had watched some good movies together. He had also attended my marriage at Meekleganj in March 1972. The next time I met him 3 decades later when he had come to Calcutta with his second wife Rita in December 2005. He called me from a hotel where he had put up with his wife on arrival in Calcutta. I immediately rushed to the hotel and brought them to my house in Salt Lake. After a long time, we merrily spent a few days together. In 2007, at my invitation, he came all the way from Bangladesh to Calcutta to attend the marriage of my younger daughter and perform Kanyadan ceremony on my behalf. I was then ill with jaundice. As ill luck could have it, Monik had also died at my place in Kolkata on April 20, 2008, while recuperating after the bypass surgery in a hospital here. Counting on me, he came to Kolkata for treatment after having a severe heart attack in his native place in Bangladesh. It was a great shock to me when he died. I lost a brother and a great friend in him. Perhaps it was the will of the Providence that I should be by his side when he died. Manik was an advocate by profession and practiced in Sylhet. Manik also had 2 marriages. His first wife Sumita having died, he married for the second time. He left behind 2 sons Suman and Sujak, and a daughter Mitu by his first wife. He did not have any offspring by his second wife, Rita. I did not have the opportunity to meet his first wife. Manik's daughter and sons are all married. Eldest Suman has 2 sons and stays in Melbourne, Australia. The second Sujak has a son and lives in Bangladesh. The daughter Mitu, too, has a son and lived in Italy. She has since shifted to London. Next to Manik is my cousin Chandan, who renounced domestic ties, became a sadhu, and lived in an ashram in Agartala. Lately, due to illness, he had been brought to his paternal house in Sylhet and was living there since. Cousin's sister Reba has 3 daughters. One of her married daughters lives in New York. I had met Reba, one of her daughters and her husband, when they had come to visit us at Calcutta on 2 different occasions. One of her daughters, named Rima, was married to a Muslim boy. I learned during my last visit to Sylhet that she works as director of music at the Dhaka University. I had an occasion to listen to a recorded song sung by her in the course of my visit to Sylhet. She has a sweet voice. Amongst my other cousin brothers whom I had met after the partition, was Shankar, who practiced law and income tax in Bangladesh. He has a son Amit, and a daughter Anamika alias Tumpa, both married. He, too, was by the side of his elder brother when the latter died in Kolkata. I had met Shankar again, sometime after the death of Manik, when he had come to Calcutta, on the way to Delhi for his treatment. He has since been blessed with a grandson, from his son Amit, and a granddaughter, from daughter Tumpa. He now toggles between USA and Bangladesh, spending 6 months in each country at a time. I met my other cousin's sister Simu also, when she came to Calcutta for treatment along with brother Shankar, sometimes in 2002. She has a son who is now a medical graduate and recently been married in Dhaka. They now live in the USA. Deepak alias Daipu is another cousin of mine from Baramama. He had visited us in Calcutta a couple of times before his marriage and once with his wife after his marriage. He lives in New York with his wife Chuma, daughter Yahilak, and son Dipta. I met his son Dipta alias Devraj and daughter Yahilak alias Deepangvita, for the first time, when they came along with their mother on a short trip to Calcutta in July 2013. We had a great time together during their brief stay with us. Both the daughter and the son have been well bred. I am very happy about that. We missed Daipu on that occasion as he could not make it to India at that time due to his preoccupations. We have regular contact with him. He is very close to my daughters also. My niece, Yahilak alias Deepangvita, has since completed her graduation and has entered medical school to fulfill her objective to become a medical practitioner. She is due for final medical in June 2022. Nephew Dipta is in engineering. My maternal uncles with their families had initially stayed in Sylhet. But later, all of them, except Baramama and his family, migrated to India and settled in Assam, at Silchar and Guwahati. Some of their cousins, too, came over to India and settled similarly. Though Baramama stayed back with his family, his son Daipu had left Bangladesh long back and had gone to Dubai. Later, he had shifted to New York and had settled there. We had very cordial relations with our maternal uncles, aunts, and cousins. Our eldest aunt, Baramama's wife, Sadhnamamima, was the lady of the house and had to manage the affairs of a big family. So far as I could remember her, she was a motherly lady. I did not see her ever after we had migrated from Sylhet. I was very close to some of my maternal uncles, particularly Kutu Mama, who was my mother's own youngest brother, and Butu Mama, who was one of the cousin brothers of my mother. I had the opportunity of being with them for a considerable time after they had settled in India. Kutu Mama had 2 marriages. The first one was a love marriage, but Choto Mamima, maternal aunt, Shefali did not live long. I can still visualize the profile of that Mamima. She was a very tidy and graceful lady. She did not have any children. Much later, Kutu Mama married for the second time. His second wife, Manju Mamima, was much younger to him but died an early death. I have a feeling, she had suffered the most during the days of extreme poverty in the family, and that finally ended her life. She left behind 2 daughters Sipra and Seema and 2 sons Babla alias Ramandu and Bapi alias Rupendu. The sons and the daughters are all married and settled now. On migration to India, Kutu Mama too had to face hard days as my sisters did. He started a furniture shop in Silchar but couldn't run it for long and found himself running from pillar to post, even for low-paid jobs. His condition became somewhat better after his elder daughter Sipra, on completion of her education, got a job at the local telephone exchange. While visiting Silchar, I used to spend most of my time with Kutu Mama in his furniture shop or elsewhere. My cousin sisters Sipra and Seema and cousin brothers Babla alias Ramandu, excepting the youngest Bapi alias Rupendu, from Kutu Mama all now live at Karimgunj with their families. Bapi lives in Silchar. Sipra has 2 daughters of whom the elder is doing chartered accountancy in Kolkata, and the younger is in college in Karimgunj. Seema has a daughter Sarnali reading in a school in Karimgunj. Brother Babla, too, has a daughter named Rima who has passed HS examination in 2017 with 89% marks in commerce stream. She is now doing her undergraduate course in commerce with Hans in accountancy. The other cousin brother Bapi alias Rupendu had strayed for some time but now is back to the family fold. He lives at Silchar. He has learned dance and has recently acclaimed honors by dancing non-stop for 24 hours. He has a son Rahul and a daughter. Botu Mama was handsome, a good sportsman, and possessed a very good physique. He too married late and did not have any offspring. Mamima had been a very nice woman. Both loved me. Mamima used to practice homeopathy. Botu Mama had been with the Indian Railways from pre-partition days but left the job on his own, the reasons are not known. In his later life, he had served for some time as manager of a hotel in Shillong. There he had stayed with his wife in the accommodation provided in the hotel. I was in Shillong doing my graduation at that time. I have mentioned about this later in the page on academic career. Botu Mama had left that job and came back to Silchar sometimes after I had left Shillong. He stayed at Silchar till death. I had last met him in 1972 when I had visited Silchar with my wife after my marriage. Both Botu Mama and Mamima were very happy to see us and had entertained us with lunch. Botu Mama died in 1995. Since then, Mamima lived alone in a flat of her own in Silchar. She had come all the way from Silchar to attend the marriage of my elder daughter in 2000. She used to ring me up if she did not get any call from me for a few days. She had been suffering from various ailments for the last couple of years of her life, as of my last visit in 2010. Lastly, she became bedridden. On the 28th of October 2014, at 6:30 a.m., she had breathed her last. I had visited her for the last time in February 2010 when I had been to Silchar to attend the last rites of my brother. She had no offspring. Pukan Mama's younger son Pradeep alias Tablu, who stayed with and looked after her, had done the last rites. Sunil Mama, one of my mother's stepbrothers, worked as a compositor in a printing press of a widely circulated English daily, Assam Tribune, in Guwahati after he had migrated from East Pakistan. According to the report published in that paper after his death, he had died in Guwahati only at the age of 43, leaving behind a son and 2 daughters, besides his wife. The elder daughter works in Guwahati in the office of the Assam Tribune. I had stayed with Sunil Mama and the aunt once, when in transit from Silchar to my place of work, at Meekleganj after my marriage in 1972. His elder daughter was a mere child at that time, and others possibly were not born. I have recently found in the leftover papers of my deceased mother a picture of Sunil Mama with his son in arms, which I reproduce here. The other two step-brothers of my mother, Rishi Mama and Ranu Mama, were bachelors. Pukin Mama, good name Kanthibhusan Das, one other cousin of my mother, settled in Guwahati post-partition. I don't remember to have seen him after we had left Sylhet, though I had passed through Guwahati several times since my college days. I had no contact with my uncles in Guwahati at that time. I did not even know that my uncles lived in Guwahati. Pukin Mama had once come to meet us. When on my way back from Silchar after my marriage, I had stopped over in Sunil Mama's house, in Guwahati. Unfortunately, we did not meet. My wife and I had been away to Shillong at that time. As I had to leave for my place of work the day after, I could not visit his place to meet him. One of Pukin Mama's sons, Kabindra, nicknamed Dipo, had been living in Guwahati with his family consisting of his wife and two sons. Mamima also stayed with him. Dipo worked in the office of the Accountant General, Assam, from where he had since retired. I had met Dipo for the first time when he visited us with his younger son at our residence in Salt Lake on March 16, 2008. When I was in Guwahati in the course of my visit to Assam in March 2014, Dipo had taken me to his house where I had met his wife Meena, younger son Krishanu and Pukin Mamima. Dipo's elder son Kaushik had been away. The younger son of Pukin Mama, Pradeep, nicknamed Tablu, now works in a private firm at Asval, Mizoram. He got married in 2013. Academic career, childhood and youth, including events and incidents. School admission and first scholarship. My regular schooling began after we had settled at Horhat. Horhat had played an important role in my life, and in the formation of my character. It was also here that I had the feeling of romantic love aroused in me in my puberty. Here I was admitted, as far as I remember, in Class 2 in Lakshmi Union High School in its primary section, known as the Anglo-Bengali Primary School, during the academic session 1951-52. At that time, we used to stay in a small house just behind the school. I used to walk down to the school alone. I took up my studies quite seriously and used to rank first in the class exam every year. I got a scholarship for the first time in life in Class 6 when I succeeded in my first public examination, called Britti Pariksha, or the ME examination, for the session 1955-56. I was the only student from my school to have that honor. The money value of the scholarship was 10 rupees per month, and the scholarship was to run for the rest of my schooling period. The amount may seem to be a paltry sum today, but it was at the time when rice was selling at 6 to 8 annas a seer. The scholarship certainly brought me recognition and honor and was an incentive for future performance. Apart from those, the money that came with it was of much help to us, in our difficult times. Great earthquake of 1950 and its fallout. Shortly after we had settled at Horhat, the great earthquake of 1950 of magnitude 8.6 MW and intensity 11, extreme, occurred in Assam. I remember it quite distinctly because of the sensation it had created within me. It was in the early evening of Independence Day that year. I was lying by the side of my father, who was telling me some story. Suddenly, we felt things around us were shaking. All of us, as also the neighbors, rushed out of the house into the open. Earth below our feet was swaying vigorously. I was very scared. I had not faced the earthquake ever before. Sound of conch shells was coming from all around, and women were giving Uladwani with a Save Us God prayer. This continued for some time, and though, maybe for a few seconds, it seemed that it would never end. However, the tremor stopped after some time. A sense of relief came upon us, but fear persisted in mind. There was no damage or destruction in the immediate neighborhood. We slept that night with fear in mind. There was either no tremor, or we did not feel any during the night. The next morning, elders went around the town to see how much damage the quake had caused. When they came back, we learned that there was the sinking of the roads and the railways at several places, but fortunately, no loss of life anywhere in the town. The only building that had collapsed, as far as I remember, was the high-rise Balibat Masjid. Houses in those days at Horhat were mostly one-storied or at best double-storied, and that saved them from fall. Later in life, I had read in various publications about this earthquake and the havoc it had created in Assam. I now find from Wikipedia that there were 3,300 casualties in Assam and Tibet caused by this earthquake. The quake had changed the relief, and formed dikes blocking tributaries of the Brahmaputra, some of which, like Subansiri, later caused severe floods when dikes gave way. Parts of Dibrugarh and Sadia were washed out. But at that time, we had no idea of the extent of the damage the quake had caused. We only knew that Dibrugarh and Sadia had been severely affected. A few people subscribed to the newspapers in those days. Television was not there. Some people had radio sets, which again, we could not afford. We, the children of those days, mostly, did not have the means of access to information on the happenings in places away from us. We did not, therefore, have any idea of the extent of damage this earthquake had caused in different parts of the very state to which we belonged. Today's children are fortunate in that they, through the electronic media and the internet, can keep track of every happening of importance anywhere in the world and even view them live. Admittedly, TV has many bad effects on children, but it has done them some good too. It has given them access to the world outside, which will add to their intelligence if properly regulated. Sources of our entertainment. Our means of entertainment in those days were school sports, annual functions, cinemas, and spending time with friends. I did not have much interest in sports. My best friend Pradeep K. Roy alias Daipu, now settled in the USA having served and retired as a chemical engineer there, was a good cricketer and used to participate in the school cricket. Udpal, since deceased, also used to play. My role in relation to the sports was of a spectator like some of my other friends, viz., Mrinal Hajra, Gokul Saha, and Ashutosh Pal, alias Asu, second boy of our class, presently settled as a physician in the UK. Gokul, long deceased, was a good singer too, and very often, we used to throng around him to listen to his songs. I seldom went to movies in my school days. I remember, the only movie I had watched during those days was Parivartan. The next time I had been to a cinema hall was after my matriculation examination. I had then watched the Bengali movie Agna Pariksha in Sankar Cinema Hall at Horhat with my cousin Manik. Manik had come from the then East Pakistan to visit us. Manik was a few months younger than me and was more of a friend. He was a cinema addict in those days. During his stay with us, I had watched with him a few more films, viz., Nayador, Lalubolu, Insaniyat. There were 3 cinema halls at Horhat in those days. These were Shankar, Eli, and Aruna. I had visited all these halls during the days Manik stayed with us. Most of all, I loved attending the annual functions of our school. Such functions, though called annual, were sometimes held for more than a year at a time. It was a regular event for me to receive prizes for academic excellence in these functions. That would bring me much pleasure. The prizes comprised good books. I enjoyed reading them. I still possess some of them. A few had been damaged by the flood in one of my places of posting. Apart from these functions, our school occasionally organized events like puppet shows, magic shows, mime shows, variety performances, theaters for the students. We much enjoyed these shows and performances. All these functions of the school used to be held in the auditorium of the Lakshmi Union Bengali Club. The school did not have in those days any auditorium of its own. Academic pursuit, performance in school. And in the matriculation examination, 1960. Coming back to my academic track record, I would like to say a few words about my brother before I dwell upon myself. When I was reading in Lakshmi Union High School, my brother Krishnakanta Das, as I have said earlier, was doing his undergraduate course in Jagannath Barua College, from where he graduated in the course of time. Later, my brother did his post-graduation in economics from Guwahati University. It may not be out of place to mention here that father was unable to provide for the entire cost of postgraduate education of my brother away from home. My brother had to supplement it by his own earning through private tuition. Coming to my school education, as I have already said, I used to rank first in every class examination, and thus reached Class X. That was 1959. It was the time to prepare for the matriculation examination due in March 1960. We were the last batch of the matriculation examens of the Guwahati University. All our teachers expected me to come out of this examination with flying colors. I prepared for the examination with care and devotion. I received whatever help I needed from my teachers. In due course, the selection test was held, and we were called upon to fill in the form for the examination. I must narrate an incident here to show how the teachers of those days were emotionally involved in the matter of performance of their students and the reputation of the school. After the selection test, all the male students due to appear at the matriculation examination were made to sit in our classroom and fill in the forms for the examination under the guidance of our Sanskrit teacher, Sudhamshu Mohan Bhattacharjee. As I was filling in my application form, some ink somehow spattered on it. I got scared and approached the teacher in charge for advice. The teacher in charge went out to consult the headmaster. Within minutes the headmaster rushed in, his whole face gleaming with joy. He patted me on the shoulder, and said, "It was a very good omen, I should fill in the same form and submit it." I did as I was advised. That headmaster, our respected Kiranmoy Bandyopadhyaya, passed away long back. But whenever I think of that incident, I see his beaming face of that day, as he rushed to the hall on getting the news of ink falling on my form. All my teachers were elated when they came to know of the incident later that day. Their expectation ran high, they hoped I would surely do something extraordinary in the university examination. One may call it a myth, but it does indeed resonate with the love and concern of our teachers for us. I did not belie the expectation of my teachers. I stood first in the university with the highest marks in mathematics, for which I was awarded a medal. I was awarded another medal for securing the first position. Replicas of both these medals are posted here. Besides mathematics and additional mathematics, I had obtained letter marks in Sanskrit and star marks in the overall performance. The percentage of marks obtained by me, on the whole, was 80.33%. On the result of this examination, I was awarded the National Merit Scholarship at 50 rupees per month for my intermediate course. I did not have any private tutor any time during my schooling, or for that matter during my entire academic career. I never felt the need of a private tutor. We did not also have the means to engage a private tutor. There was none at home, to help me in my studies. At the same time, there was no pressure also from any end so far as my studies and results were concerned. It was my inner self, which forced me to do whatever needed to be done to get to the top. Whatever assistance I needed, it all came from my teachers first in the school and later in the college. I am grateful to all my teachers for what they have taught me. Tribute to the teachers. Our teachers had been living examples of dedication. They were modest in living. Some of our teachers in school were quite poor, of them, some even did not have proper clothes to wear, and wore clothes torn and stitched in places. They were poorly paid, private tuition to augment income was scarce. There was also no provision for the pension for private or aided schools those days. Yet, they did not lack initiative or commitment to their job. They were always there to help us whenever required. They were fully devoted to their task, had the intellectual capability to inspire the students. Teaching for them was not merely a profession, but also a mission. They were not after money as today's class of professional teachers mostly are. Our headmaster was known for his strictness and personality. Students respected and dreaded him alike. A glimpse of him outside his office chamber was enough to scare the students gossiping outside to run to the classroom. He also taught us English in higher classes. He made the subject interesting with his lucid explanation and skillful presentation. Those teachers of ours are no more in this world. But I shall remain ever grateful to them for making me what I am today. My views on private tuition. Private tuition has become an inseparable part of students' life today, in contrast to our times. Coaching centers have spread in towns and cities like the cobweb. I feel distressed when I find young boys and girls rushing to the teachers' places or coaching centers after hurriedly sending a few gulps of food down the throat, once they return from the school. Bright students are no exception. At the day end, they return totally exhausted with their minds jumbled up. They have no time for games or other kinds of childhood activities to refresh their minds. Their childhood, so to say, has been sacrificed at the altar of mark-producing studies. Parents, too, by and large, are encouraging the growth of private tuition facilities. With easy money at hand and craze for higher marks in the exam for their wards in mind, these parents make a mad rush for better private tuition centers/private tutor once their needs arise. This unhealthy practice could spread its wings due to the inadequacy of teaching in the government and the aided schools. The better part of teachers in these schools today is money-minded and more interested in private tuition. A large section of them is also politically aligned and spends a major slice of their time in political activities for their own survival. They barely have the time and will to prepare themselves and teach properly in the class. If the subjects were properly taught in the school, there would be no reason for the students to rush for private tuition. From my own experience, I could say if a teacher is competent and earnest, and the student is devoted to studies, attentive, and hard-working, there would generally be no need for private tuition. In fact, private tuition does more harm than good. The focus in private tuition being on selective syllabi with an eye only to the performance in the examination, it acts counter to acquiring wholesome knowledge. According to an educationist, tuition centers have become mark or grade generating factories where the student resorts to reading, cramming and scoring. To my mind, this menace of private tuition could be fought by strictly enforcing a teaching environment in the educational institutions and by having an adequate number of competent and devoted teachers with proper orientation and training. There are, of course, competent and devoted teachers even now, but their numbers stand nowhere near others. My observations, though based on what I had seen at places I had been, conform to various writings and deliberations on the present-day education problems. There has also been a wide-scale debate on banning of private tuition, and private tuition has actually been banned up to Class 7 under root. Relation with girls in school days. Ours was a co-education school up to Class 6. Once we reached Class 7, girls were transferred to the morning section exclusively for the girls of higher classes. We had in our school, as was the case everywhere, students from different social and economic backgrounds. I came from a weak socio-economic background, as I will explain later, and because of this, I used to be somewhat timid and shy and could not mix well with everyone, particularly the girls. I have already mentioned some of my friends who all were boys. A boy having a girlfriend in those days was rare in places like ours. I knew all the girls in our class, and some of the girls in junior classes too, by name and face. But I did not have any of them as a friend. I rarely talked with the girls. Despite having a natural attraction for girls, I did not feel at ease to talk to them in my younger days. Mostly, I preferred to avoid them. Every one of my female classmates with whom I had occasions to interact later in life, had mentioned about my unresponsiveness when they tried to enter any conversation with me in those days. My elusive love. Notwithstanding the above trait or deficiency, as you prefer to call it, of my character, I had developed a deep love for a classmate of mine at that very young age of 12 or 13 years, though I couldn't express it to her due to my timidity and shyness. I, being an introvert, could not also mention it to anyone else, including my friends. No one, including my best friend, had any knowledge of it. I feel it is now time to bring out that part of my life in which I had an overwhelming romantic feeling deeply hidden in my heart for decades, with no way to find its expression. The days and the feelings might have gone, but the memory stays on. The classmate of whom I am speaking was of non-Bengali origin and came of an affluent and cultured family. Let me bestow upon her a fictitious name Toshita to make it easier for me to talk about her in these pages. Toshita spoke excellent Bengali, was dusky, beautiful, and had an overly sweet voice. She used to have a bob-cut hair. She was learning the dance too. We were in class 6 when she came and joined us. She stayed in our school only for a year or so but had left an indelible impression on my young mind without being aware of it. I always had a craze for beauty. The moment I saw her, I fell for her. It may be called love at first sight. But the fact remains that the sense of romantic love was not there in me till then, and before I saw her. It was thenceforth that I would feel an ecstatic joy within myself at the very sight of her. While in school, I would always look for her in the classroom. Her presence in the room in proximity would fill me with joy. The day she absented, I would be dismayed. The day would become meaningless to me, and my ability to concentrate on any matter would get lost. So intense was my love and emotion for her. That again was my silent one-sided love. We had not talked to each other till then. In fact, we had never been in conversation with each other. I had only once an occasion to speak to her, and that was when I was escorting her home in a rickshaw after she had a fall within the school premises. Our assistant headmaster Ratan Mohan Ganguly had asked me to reach her home. At that time, too, our conversation was limited to my query as to her injury from fall and her reply to that. Due to my shyness and her silence, maybe because of pain from her injury, the conversation could not proceed beyond that. When we reached her house, her mother asked me in and offered me a glass of water. Soft drinks had not made their appearances till then. Toshita had rushed straight to her room. In our conservative society of those days, especially at a small place like ours, a boy could not mix with a girl, without being frowned upon. It was all the more difficult for me. I was known as a bright student, and my association with any girl in the open, particularly in the context of my weak socio-economic background, would be the talk of the town and injurious to the reputation of both. It could have caused an adverse effect on my family too. I couldn't, therefore, meet Toshita privately at or near her house or on her way to or from school, though I knew where she lived at that time. We did not have cell phones or the internet as of today. To talk to Toshita in private, I used to reach school much before the scheduled time. But I had never got her alone. Thus, though in my heart of hearts, I was in deep love with her, I couldn't communicate it to her. Her feelings towards me too, remained unknown. As I have said, the seed of fierce love for Toshita had been sown in my heart when I was 12 to 13 years old. A year hence Toshita had left our school, and I did neither see her nor could speak to her after that until decades later. But my love for her intensified with time and engulfed the whole of my heart. It had not died but remained deeply embedded in my heart and sublimed me with a heavenly joy in my desolate moments. I can't say if she was at the back of my mind when I had refused later in life several marriage proposals received through my guardians. At later stages, I could not also respond to the overtures of women who felt interested in me and wanted to get closer. I could never feel towards any of them the way I had felt towards my childhood love. 2 women had openly displayed their love for me in my early youth, but I did not feel the urge to respond. Much later, some other woman, at some vulnerable moment of my life, had, however, won me over. That woman was beautiful, possessive, and had loved me fiercely. It was in her that I had realized the meaning of divinity in love. It is indeed a rare gift one gets in life. This happened when my feelings for Toshita had become somewhat dull. When in class 7, I did not initially know that Toshita had left our school. I thought that she had moved to the morning section along with other girls of our class on promotion to class 7. I was in the hope that I would meet her someday, At the break of morning section, before our class started, both morning and the day sections of our classes used to be held in the same school building. It was then that I came to know that she had left our school but had no inkling where she had gone. I could not pull up the courage to inquire at her house because of the rigid social order of those days. When I had first heard of my exceptional result in the matriculation examination, it was Toshida whose name had flashed in my mind. Immediately after the declaration of the result, we had to leave Horhat due to a large-scale linguistic disturbance in Upper Assam. This I have described in detail later in this chapter. I could not try to find Toshida at that point of time. Possibly, that could be an opportune moment to get closer to her. But time was not on my side. Later, I had tried to locate her for years but did not succeed. Decades later, I came to know that she had been doing her course in music in Shantiniketan when I had been looking for her in the early years after our matriculation examination. In due course, she had graduated in music from there. I had then also learned about her preoccupation, family composition, etc., as of 2015. I did not, however, have the opportunity to meet her since she had left our school. Continuing with what I have been telling about my love for Toshida, I must admit here that the memory of Toshida became somewhat clouded during the last phase of my academic life. That phase had started at the mid-stage of my post-graduation days, when I had somewhat lost myself amid friends and glamour of the city life, and it continued till I joined the service at Birhampuri. The real name to which the name Toshida relates had a romantic appeal to me for decades. That name used to stir up my passion for the named. In those days, Toshida had emotionally been an inseparable part of my life. A day would hardly pass without thinking about her, though I did not even know where she had been. My life's depiction, particularly the emotional aspect of it, would have been incomplete and untrue without telling about her. That brings her here. Her name would also appear at places as I continue describing my life and feelings henceforward. Hard days we had faced. During the period of my high school days, about 1956 to 1959, and later till my graduation, we were facing an acute financial hardship. My father had left his job due to differences with the owners of the establishment where he worked. He was after setting up a printing press of his own. He did not have the money for it. With great efforts, and assistance of some well-wishers, including the then Deputy Commissioner of Sivsagar District, Mr. B. L. Sen, he procured a refugee rehabilitation loan of 5,000 rupees from the Refugee Relief and Rehabilitation Department of the Government of Assam and set up a small printing press in the name and style of Das and Sons Printing Works in the year 1956 or thereabouts. The press was originally set up in a rented premise belonging to one J.C. Barua, an Assamese gentleman, more about him later, at the crossing of JPR Road and Garali Road. Shortly thereafter, it was shifted to a rented single-room accommodation owned by one Bahadur Singh, a leading Punjabi businessman of Horhat, on JPR Road. This shifting was possibly in consideration of lesser rent. Our financial condition was so bad at that time that once my father had defaulted in payment of a sum of 30 rupees towards 3 months' rent for this place. The house owner behaved impudently over the default of rent. He had even gone to the extent of throwing some accessories of the press out on the road, in the absence of the father. Father was naturally very offended. He shifted the press to a room across the road within 24 hours, after clearing the house owner's dues by taking loans from elsewhere. The new premise was rented from one Rakesh Das, a utensil dealer of Horhat, who had stood by us at that time. Later, 2 other adjoining interior rooms were added to the rented front room of the house for the shifting of our residence there. The press was, however, subsequently moved back to its original location of J.C. Barua's building at the junction of Garali Road and JPR Road, which was more convenient for the business purposes. We continued to stay in the rented portion of Rakesh Das's house that now also included the front room, where the press had been located, before shifting. There were a couple of other tenants within the premises, but the environment was peaceful. It was from here that I had appeared for my matriculation examination. Incidentally, we had found a nice lady in the wife of the house owner, Rakesh Das. She was Thirubala Das. The new premises for the press in J.C. Barua's building consisted of 3 rooms, 2 in the front and 1 in the back. The rent, as far as I remember, was 40 rupees. Next to our press in the same building, there was a book stall run by one of our teachers, Umlendipur Kayastha. Adjoining the book stall was a tailoring shop. At the other extreme end was a similar accommodation hired by a tribal lady, who used to deal in oranges during the winter. A Bengali gentleman, who claimed to be a business partner of the lady, used to visit from Calcutta at times and stay with her. Once, my father had asked me to bring back a hammer of ours from the lady, who had taken it for her use. I went to fetch the hammer. It was an afternoon. The door of the room, where the lady stayed, was ajar. I was about to enter the room but had to step back at what I saw inside. The Bengali gentleman and the tribal lady were lying on the bed in a compromising position. I was in a dilemma, whether to move in or turn back. The lady saved the situation. She had seen me. Knowing what I had come for, she showed me the place where the hammer had been kept. Neither of them showed any concern or embarrassment at my presence in the midst of their activity. They possibly took me to be a mere lad incapable of reading the situation. A lad I was certainly, but had the ingenuity to understand what it was all about. I returned with the hammer but did not tell anyone anything about what I had seen. Our house owner, J.C. Barua himself, had a shop, probably of spares of various sorts, in another building of his adjacent to our press, facing the Gareli Road. The winter countenance of Mr. Barua still floats before my eyes. Mr. Barua, a monkey cap on his head and a muffler around the neck, would always ask, "Hi boy. How are you?" whenever I came across him. He used to tell my father, "You will see the son of yours will shine in the future." He had seen me closely while I worked in the press to help the father, still being a school-going child. The premises that J.C. Barua owned and let out at that time had undergone a complete change over the years, so much so that during my visit to Horhat in 2014, I had difficulty in identifying the area and the shop Sri Barua had owned. Some of the present shop owners there could not even recognize him when I mentioned his name. It was later during my visit to Horhat in February 2016 that I suddenly came across one of the sons of J.C. Barua having the same initial as his father. That son of Senior J.C. Barua called me from a rickshaw he was going by when someone had pointed me out to him. He, too, was quite old now. We just exchanged pleasantries. My father could not afford to keep any regular employee in the press he had established. He used to manage the work with the casual and the job-rated employees and his personal labor, stretching himself to the maximum extent. By nature, I have always been very compassionate and duty-bound. I felt for my father, and to give him some relief, I started, on my own. I was possibly in class 7 at that time, learning various works of the printing press like composing, preparing of format for matters to be printed, proofreading and machine manning. As I was a mindful learner, it didn't take me long to learn them. I could even work out the rates for various printing jobs. Having thus acquired the basic knowledge, I started helping father in these works whenever I found time, particularly after the school hours and on Sundays and holidays. Sometimes, I also managed the affairs of the press during the absence of my father due to illness or otherwise. There would be more pressure of work during examination season and election period. Printing of question papers for school examinations and of voter lists for elections was time-bound works. I used to be involved in these jobs for composing, proofreading, and related items of work. I had to devote more time to the press on such occasions, but it was never at the cost of my school attendance or study. I compensated for the extra hours spent in the press by extending hours of my late-night studies at home. My niece Sulekha, from my eldest sister, had at that time come to stay with us for some time. She was not much younger to me and was close. She, too, had learned composing work and helped us in the press. My brother, sometimes of his own and some other times at the instance of my mother, also used to help the father in running the printing machine and managing the press. The only printing machine we had was a treadle machine. It needed considerable physical strength and energy to run it manually. It was not always possible to get a job worker for running the machine. On such occasions, my father used to run the machine himself. He was around 60 years of age at that time. It was extremely strenuous for him at his age to run the machine. I wanted to do the job myself. But father won't let, except in case of some emergency, because of my tender age. I felt sorry for the father. My brother, of course, used to relieve the father at times. Much later, maybe towards the end of 1959, an electric motor was installed to run the machine electrically. Possibly father had secured an additional government loan for the purpose. The press was still in J.C. Burayah's rented premises when that happened. Before I conclude this section, I must say that the composing work I did in the press had helped me in improving my knowledge of languages to quite some extent. Father's severe skin disease. Once during this period, my father had a severe skin eruption on his lower leg. Something like boils would appear on the skin, which would burst out, exposing the flesh inside. He had a number of boils like this between the knee and the ankle. The wound would go deeper with days. A retired civil surgeon of those days, Dr. Rabindranath Deb alias Ruby Deb, had been treating him. I always accompanied the father when he went to see the doctor. Every other day, the wound would be cleaned and treated with medicine with the change of dressing. But there was no improvement. We became worried. One day, an old Assamese village man came to our press. Seeing the wound on my father's leg, he inquired about it. He offered to bring along on his next visit some indigenous oil and plant leaves to treat the wound. Some days later, he came with the leaves and the oil he had promised, and explained the procedure for use. It speaks abound of the compassion a simple village man had in his heart for a suffering fellow being, little known to him. Father started using without hesitation the oil and the plant leaves in the manner explained to him. The miraculous was the result. The wounds started healing within a fortnight. That which did not show any improvement even after 6 months of allopathic treatment, completely healed within a couple of months. It did not relapse during the lifetime of my father. So effective was the treatment. The village man did not also take any money for it. My father had presented him with an umbrella. We felt the man was God sent to us. We have in India many such unknown talents, who can do wonders if they get the chance. These talents die unexplored for want of scope to develop innovative ideas, particularly in the backward rural areas of the country. It is our misfortune. My studies in school days. However, never during these days, I allowed my studies to be hampered. I believed in the tenet, oft-quoted precept of our Sanskrit teacher, and tried to translate it in my life while I stuck to my duty of helping the father and the family. I used to keep late hours to complete my studies. At times, I would feel sleepy but then sprinkled water in the eyes to keep myself awake. Despite this, sometimes I would fall asleep with head on the table, or on the back of the chair. My mother used to keep a tab on me, and whenever she found me sleeping like that, she would persuade me to go to bed. In such cases, I would invariably get up in the small hours to resume my studies. My sleeping hours in those days had been very few, 4 or 5 hours a night, and sometimes even less. It may be due to this that I have developed sleep disorder later in life. We didn't have electricity in our house. I used to study in the light of kerosene lamp. Kerosene was available in plenty, and as always, it was a poor man's fuel. As the kerosene burned, it deposited soot on the chimney, making the glow of the lantern dimmer. My mother removed the soot, cleaned the chimney, and even the tape inside every day to make the light brighter. In the summer, when it was hot, I used a hand fan to cool myself and drive out the mosquitoes. When one hand remained busy with fanning, the other would help me in writing and reading. During the latter part of my preparation for the matriculation examination, I had bouts of fever accompanied by vomiting on 3 or 4 successive occasions. This made me physically weak. None of these obstacles of poverty, spending hours in press work, away from studies, or physical weakness could, however, hamper my studies or dampen my spirit. To the contrary, they made me more resolute to get to my goal. My later life story would show that I had always been resolute, disciplined, fearless, and sincere to my work, wherever I had been. I firmly believe that my struggle during those younger days and the regulated life I later lived in the missionary college hostel helped in adorning my character with these qualities. Our family conditions in those days. As I have said, during the early days of setting up the press and mostly thereafter, we were passing through a trying time. Income from the press was not enough for a decent living. My brother took up private tuition to meet his own expenditure and supplement the family income to the extent possible. That was the time when my brother did not have, even a second set of clothes for going out, and had to manage with just one set, washing it during the night, when needed. We used to get our clothing creased by putting them under the mattress on which we would sleep. My mother did all the household work, as we couldn't afford to engage any helper. Besides cooking, cleaning of the utensils, washing clothes, and keeping the house tidy, she even had to fetch at times, water from a nearby tap, within the premises of our house. I spent the scholarship money I got during this period mostly on family needs. In such a scenario, I did not have the time, mind, or the means to participate in any extracurricular activity. I seldom went out for the afternoon games or to spend time with friends. Not that my parents would have objected, had I wished. In fact, they always encouraged me to go out and play with friends. But my inner self prevented me from indulging in this, which I considered a luxury for me when I could help my family by working in the press in this spare time. I couldn't forget Toshida even when we were in such a difficult situation. During this period, too, her face used to flash in my mind from time to time. She had left our school a couple of years back, and I did not know where she had gone. Those of my friends I was close to, too, had no idea. I couldn't ask our female classmates, who could have information about her, due to my shyness and lack of communication with them. I could not also visit her home to inquire about her due to my timidity and the then social order. Once in a while, I roamed around the popular landmarks in the town for a chance meeting but had no luck. No doubt, she stayed in my mind and heart, but it could distract me in no way from my goal of attaining success in life to come out of poverty our family had been living in. With my love for her embedded in my heart, I concentrated more on my studies. In the process, I developed a mental orientation by which I could shut the door of a part of my mind for my personal desire or longing to reside there, when I could devote myself to my duties and responsibilities undisturbed. The honor and the need of our family always stood above my personal desire or longing. For this, I couldn't cross the line to get to the person I loved. Nor could I forsake my family later, in search of the advancement of my career abroad. During my postgraduate days when I was in Kolkata, my homesickness had already dissipated. My brother, too, was employed and had a steady income to sustain the family. At that time, jobs on foreign lands were much easier to get. I had a brilliant academic career. It would not possibly be difficult for me to secure a foreign scholarship or a job voucher for migrating to a foreign land in search of a career had I wished. Worries for my aged parents, who could need me any time in their life, had restrained me from moving out of the country. I might have sacrificed my career and might have been bearing unbearable pains in consequence thereof, yet I feel satisfied that I could be of service to my parents till their last. Though, I bear the remorse that I could not be by the side of either of them when they breathed their last. Towards the end of my schooling, when our financial condition improved a little, we employed a Nepali boy who did sundry work of the press and helped the mother in her household work. The boy lived with us. He was an amusing character. After doing some work, he would sit to take a rest. If anyone asked him to do any work at that time, he would simply say in his inimitable tongue, "Abi Aram Korga, I am taking rest now." We enjoyed listening to his words and would find pleasure in mentioning them in family gatherings. Years later, I have seen poverty at close quarters and felt its bite. Today, I may have come up levels above where I had been in my childhood, teens, and the early youth. It is needless to mention I had to tread a long path through the crests and troughs of life to reach here. What needs the mention is that I have not forgotten my past. I believe the past gives one farsightedness. I have seen my sisters and uncles, who were once affluent at their native places, being reduced to extreme poverty, after migrating to India. Some of them even died without proper food and treatment. My parents tried to help them at times but could not do much due to our own limitations. Those scenes still haunt me. I feel for the poor. It hurts me deeply when I see a destitute recovering the thrown away food from the wastes for his consumption. In that backdrop, I feel agitated when I find frequent wastage of food in my own household, and this often results in domestic squabbles. I feel hurt. I could not stop such wastage at my home due to the indifference of my wife. I hope, by now, I could give you an idea of the socio-economic conditions of our family during my puberty and teens, and to some extent, of the development of my mental frame based on that. Bangal Kedeo movement of 1960. Its fallout, forced to leave Horhat. Well, I'd again digressed. Back to where I had been. Our result of the matriculation examination was announced at a time, July 1960, when an anti-Bengali movement, called Bangal Kedeo, Drive Away the Bengalis, had taken a serious turn in the Brahmaputra Valley in Assam. The movement had started when the Assam Pradesh Congress Committee raised a proposal to declare the Assamese as the one and only official language of the state. Obviously, the proposal was not acceptable to the Bengalis of Assam. There were protests all around, which culminated in the linguistic riot. Strong anti-Bengali feeling ran high amongst a large section of the Assamese people. Many of the Bengali Hindus living in the Brahmaputra Valley were killed, their property destroyed and looted. Significantly, Bengali Muslims remained unaffected. Many towns were brought under curfew, and the armed forces were pressed into service at some places. I remember having seen a military contingent patrolling the road passing by our house at Horhat. Those who had the means started fleeing from Assam. According to Wikipedia, 50,000 Bengali Hindus had fled to West Bengal and another 90,000 to Barak Valley during this movement. In view of my result in the matriculation examination, many well-wishers of ours had advised my father to take me out of the disturbed area. My father decided to leave the town, keeping our press under lock and key for the time being. I was morose to learn that I had to leave this town of my sweet memories, but there was no other option in the evolved situation. Accordingly, one morning, accompanied by my father, mother, and brother, I boarded the train for Silchar. Silchar, situated on the bank of River Barak, though in Assam, was a Bengali-dominant area. We moved under an escort of some prominent Bengalis of Horhat up to a point, called Lumding. From Lumding, we moved to Silchar by another train, through the hills of North Kuchar. This part of the railways, known as Hill Section, in NF Railway, was a meter gauze section. It took more than 2 decades to lay this track, 1882 to 1903, through an exceedingly difficult terrain. The track presents an exquisite beauty of nature on its way. I still enjoy the journey through this section, last traveled in 2007. I am tempted to mention some special features of this route for those who have not traveled through the area. Trains here pass through as many as 37 tunnels and over 586 bridges. Some of these tunnels were quite long, and it was pitch dark inside. Some low-wattage electric lamps though were provided here and there. The longest was probably tunnel number 11 near a place called Mahur, measuring 1,192 feet in running length. Diesel or electric engine had not arrived at the time we had undertaken this journey. Trains were then hauled by steam engines. The gush of the burnt coal gas coming into the compartment created a suffocating atmosphere when the train moved through the tunnels. The doors and the windows of the compartment remained closed, when inside the tunnels for security reasons. Some of what we had seen in the older days, of course, have since become history with the introduction of diesel engines and change of track. The track was, meanwhile, widened to broad gauze after years of dilly-dallying. With the change in the alignment that the track had undergone, it was likely that many of the old places with their beauties would be found missing. NF Railway has made a video on the movement of train in a section of this beautiful route of bygone days and has uploaded it in YouTube. Continuing with the journey I was describing, I may state that the bridges mostly connected one hill to the other through the canyons for the trains to move. Underneath such bridges were seen deep gorges. On some portions of its path, the trains meandered along the course of a river called Jadinga flowing far below. The river played hide and seek, sometimes being visible, and at other times, going out of sight. The water of the river was crystal clear, and the boulders under the water could be clearly seen from the train above. In the course of the journey along this route, beautiful wildflowers of different sizes, shapes and colors were seen at places sometimes almost at the touching distance from the train, particularly when the train moved close to the rise of the hills or through the cuts in them. During the winter, when the sun rises in the hills at dawn, the view it presents through the morning mist is mesmerizing. The train climbed up a steep incline or went down a deep decline during a stretch of its path from a station named Harangajo to a station named Jadinga. For this, 2 engines were pressed into service to pull up or hold back the bogies, as the case may be, during this part of the journey. All of a sudden, the hills ended, and the train started running on plain lands and through the tea gardens, and reached the junction station at Bhadrapur. From Bhadrapur, it moved over the plains to Silchar. It took the train around 12 hours to cover this distance of about 213 km from Lumding to Silchar. At the end of this journey, we reached Silchar via Bhadrapur, 24 HRS after we had started. Train journeys in those days were extremely painstaking. There was neither sleeper berth nor reservation of seats in lower classes. We had traveled by the 3rd class and had to keep sitting all through the journey in a horrendously crowded bogie. We almost had to fight our way out to have our food at the station called Haflong. At Silchar, we had first put up in the house of our maternal uncle Kutu Mama, my mother's own youngest brother. Our maternal uncle had, by then, migrated from the then East Pakistan and had been running a small business in furniture at a place on the bank of the river Barak. One of his stepbrothers, my Rishi Mama, and his maternal uncle, my Sadhu Dada, who, too, had migrated from East Pakistan, worked in his furniture shop. He, Kutu Mama, lived in a 2.5-roomed rented accommodation belonging to one Govinda Babu in a locality called Nazir Patti. Besides his wife and 4 children, my uncle had his stepbrother, my Rishi Mama, and a distant maternal uncle of my father, Ashwini Babu, whom we called Dada Mosai, staying with him. Ashwini Dada Mosai was a pensioner. In spite of the severe limitation of space, my maternal uncle had gladly accommodated us in his house. The house owner Govinda Babu had an umbrella shop in the front portion of his house, and lived with his family in the back, within the same premises. Amongst his children was a son Kayan and a daughter Sheila whom I could remember. Later, my father secured a job at a local printing press and shifted to a rented house. He worked in that press until the situation at Horhat became normal and conducive for the return of the family. Entry to and exit from Presidency College, Calcutta. There in Silchar, we met a gentleman named Sunil Indau, an acquaintance of our maternal uncle. Mr. Indau advised me to get myself admitted to Presidency College, Calcutta, and offered to assist me if I needed. Accordingly, one morning we took a flight to Calcutta. My elder brother and Mr. Indau accompanied me. That was my first air travel and the first visit to Calcutta. In Calcutta, we learned that the last date for admission to Presidency College had been over. Mr. Indau was not a man to give up easily. He arranged an interview with Mr. Nirmal Kumar Siddhanta, the then Vice-Chancellor of Calcutta University. We met Mr. Siddhanta at his residence on Loudon Street, and at his intervention, I got myself admitted to Presidency College in the pre-university science course. College authorities also initiated steps to arrange a seat for me in the hostel. Professor Sanat Bose, noted mathematician, was the principal of Presidency College, and Professor Haraprasad Mitra was the superintendent of Eden Hostel, at that time. But my mind started working on the reverse. A sense of homesickness came into play. I was much attached to my parents, I had never stayed away from them. I told my brother that I couldn't stay and study in a place far from home, having no friend or relation around. The city had raised awe in me, a teenager from a small town of Assam. Besides, I had worries in the back of my mind, for the future of our family in view of the unusual situation prevailing in Upper Assam at that point of time. Our press at Horhat had been closed, there was no other source of income for the family at that time. It was some time later that my father had secured a job in a printing press at Silchar, and that too, at a modest salary. My brother, however, tried his best to persuade me to stay and study in Presidency College in the interest of my career. But I didn't relent. Ultimately, he had to take me back home. There ends my connection with Presidency College. I am indebted to Mr. Indau for all that he had done for me and feel sorry that I couldn't fulfill his wishes. I am still not sure if my decision to leave Presidency College was right or wrong. For, while on the one hand, there was a great prospect of rising to the top, on the other, the uncertainty of completing the course due to financial constraint and the apprehension of me being swept away by the glamour of city life was not the less. The apprehension was due to none being there to keep a tab on me and my self-confidence being not developed fully till then. Entry to and exit from Karimgunj College, Karimgunj, Assam. Back home at Silchar, I had to get admitted to a local college quickly. Time was fast running out, I could lose an academic year unless I acted promptly. I first had to find out a good college. From available local information, I learned that Karimgunj College in the nearby town of Karimgunj was somewhat a better college in the vicinity. I quickly got myself admitted there in the ISC course. I also needed a place to stay there, it was not possible to commute from the places we lived in. College authorities arranged for my accommodation in the college hostel. Considering my result in the matriculation examination, the college authorities exempted all kinds of fees for admission and also granted me free studentship. There were days left before the classes started. I and my father, who had accompanied me for admission, returned home at Silchar. Though I got admitted, I was not happy and felt small, the place was not to my liking. While, in such an unhappy state of mind, I was waiting at Silchar for my classes to commence in the Karimgunj College, I received a letter, a postcard, from my school friend Daipu, Pradeep Kishore Roy. My post-metric race for college admission should normally have ended at Karimgunj. But the letter from Daipu changed the entire scenario. It was perhaps here that some unknown forces, by whatever name it was called, came into play. We had left Horhat in an unusual situation. I could not meet any of my friends before I had left, and as such, there was no question of giving anyone our address of Silchar. I myself only knew that we would be putting up at our maternal uncle's place in the locality called Nazir Padi, the complete address of which again was unknown to me. We were then almost in a floating condition. It is still a mystery to me as to how that postcard written by Daipu had reached us in this backdrop. As far as I remember, the letter was brought by my brother from my maternal uncle's place, his furniture shop or residence. Daipu had written that he had got admitted to St. Anthony's College in Shillong. He invited me to join there so that we could stay and study together. He also informed that the college authorities had offered to grant me free studentship in the college and provide me with free food and lodge in the hostel if I joined there. I was elated. St. Anthony's College was one of the leading colleges in Assam at that time. Besides, Shillong had its own charms. Being the then capital city of Assam, it was a developed place with better connectivity and a lot more facilities than Karimganj. It should be a great pleasure to stay amidst its scenic beauty. I had never been to a hill station before. Dipo and I had read together in school, and his presence in the college and the hostel was an added attraction for me. Financially too, it would be of much help to us. Shillong being a cosmopolitan place was also free from anti-Bengali feeling. Neither my parents nor my brother had any objection to my change of the institute. But I had to have a transfer certificate from Karimganj College, where I had already got admitted, before I could join any other college, in Assam. I approached the principal of Karimganj College for the transfer certificate. The principal tried to persuade me to stay in his college. When I did not agree, he asked me to pay all the fees and other charges that were exempted earlier at the time of admission. I paid the charges and obtained the necessary transfer certificate. Thus, ended my connection with Karimganj College. Final destination for ISC. St. Anthony's College, Shillong. One morning thereafter, I don't remember the exact date, most likely it would be sometime in August 1960, I, accompanied by my elder brother, left Silchar for Guwahati, now Guwahati, on the way to Shillong. In the first part of our journey, we moved again through the hill section of NF Railway, the beauty of which I had described earlier during my journey from Horhat. We passed through the second part of our journey at night and reached Guwahati the next morning. I was new to Guwahati and knew nothing about it. My brother knew it well as he had spent his days here during his postgraduate studies at the university situated at nearby Yahalukbari. We stayed in the hotel. I spent the day moving around in Guwahati town. The town was beautifully located in the backdrop of rivers and hills. The majestic river Brahmaputra passed by it. With some hills rising, as it were, from within the river, it presented a wonderful sight. In the distance, one could see the outline of the Garo and the Kasai Jayanti hills. The Kamakhya hills, on the top of which was the famous temple of Mother Kamakhya, were nearby. I had occasions to visit Kamakhya temple much later in my life, once with my mother and wife and twice with my wife, the last time being in 2007 when I revisited Assam 25 years after I had left it. The temple was beautifully located on the top of the hill Neel Uchal, and one could have the full view of Guwahati town below from here. In the darkness of night, the town looked like a chain of dotted lights. One could see long queues of worshippers visiting the temple every day during the specified visiting hours. The temple had different entry points with entry fees of different denominations for getting to the deity. The deity's podium was deep under the ground and was pitch dark. High wattage electric lamps had been put in place to fight the darkness. Also, a number of large diameter stand fans had been provided to control the heat inside. In spite of all these provisions, the atmosphere inside was suffocating due to a large number of devotees assembling there at specified hours of the day. Further down below, there was a Shiva lingam with a shallow watercourse encircling it. To get there, one had to pass through a narrow passage from the deity's podium bending oneself, at points. An offering to the lingam could be made through a priest while standing on the narrow stairs of 2 to 3 brick lengths by the side of the watercourse. This picture of the temple has been drawn based on my experience of the last visit in 2007. The population of Guwahati at that time was not as explosive as it is today. Houses were thinly dispersed. The town was more or less neat and clean. Rickshaws were the main conveyance, though a few city buses did also ply. Shillong is in the hills of Kasai and Jayanti at a distance of 99.5 km from Guwahati. Our journey from Guwahati to Shillong was by road. The road from Guwahati leading to Shillong was called GS Road, an abbreviation for Guwahati-Shillong Road. We started for Shillong the next day at around 6 a.m. by a bus of Assam State Transport Corporation. In those days, GS Road in the hills was not as wide as it is today. It used to be a one-way road with a crossing for vehicles from the two ends of Guwahati and Shillong at an intermediate place called Mungpua. Gates were installed at Mungpua for this purpose. To regulate the movement of vehicles on this route, There were fixed timings at intervals of 3 hours, e.g. 6 a.m., 9 a.m., 12 noon, and 4 p.m. when vehicles could start from either end. No vehicle could take up the journey after 4 p.m. or at hours other than those specified. In the course of my trip to Shillong later in 2007, I found Mungpyo too had changed a great deal. The restaurants, where we used to have breakfast or evening tea on our way to or from Shillong at our times, were no longer there. Those had been replaced by smaller ones with much lesser varieties of food items to cater to the needs of traveling passengers. Some big dhaba-type eating houses had developed, and these were quite popular. There were other changes too, and changes were all expected. It was more than 4 decades since I had last traveled along this route as a student of Shillong. For the first time, long after completing my academic career, I had an occasion to make a brief day visit to Shillong in 1981-82 with my wife and children. I was in a hurry at that time and being otherwise absorbed, did not have time to look for changes. Coming back to the instant journey, I may reiterate that I had never been to a hill station before and was therefore excited. As the bus meandered along the curvy roads climbing up the hills, I was mesmerized by the natural beauty. Deep gorges on the one side and steep hills on the other were awe-inspiring. Occasionally, thin rope-like natural streams were coming down the hills. In the course of my subsequent journeys on this route, I found hill people bathing or washing their clothes in the water of these streams at the points where the streams had hit the roadside flat land. Some people were seen coming down the hills at places, carrying their produce in long conical baskets. Tribal women carried young children and babies on their back, tied with a piece of cloth running through their armpits and knotted in the front. As the bus climbed up further, I started feeling the chill and had to put on warm clothes. We had our breakfast at Mungpyo and continued the journey through nature. I could not, however, enjoy the scenic beauty for long. Soon nausea took me over. For the rest of my journey, I was in a drowse and came around only on reaching Shillong. We reached at around 10 a.m., put up in a hotel, had some food, and rushed to the college. Reverend Father A. Joseph, the principal of St. Anthony's College, welcomed me with open arms and arranged for my immediate admission in the intermediate science course. The subjects I chose were English, Bengali, physics, mathematics, chemistry, and additional mathematics as an optional subject. I was also allotted accommodation in a single-seated room in the adjacent college hostel. It was all free of cost. My brother, who had accompanied me, left Shillong the next morning after I had settled down in the hostel. St. Anthony's College, to which I was admitted, was in an area called Letamkra. Most of the renowned educational institutions in Shillong were situated in this area. That way, the area was somewhat like the College Street of Calcutta. The road junction in front of our college was called Don Bosco Square, named after St. John Bosco, better known as Don Bosco. St. Mary's College for Girls and St. Edmund's School and College were nearby. The famous cathedral, Mary Help of Christian Church, was beside Don Bosco School and a little further from our college on its opposite side. Our college was a missionary college of the Roman Catholic sect while St. Edmund's College was of the Protestant sect. Students of our college were called Athonians and those of St. Edmund's College, Edmundians. Our college was situated in a beautiful new building. But our hostel was in an old 2-storied wooden structure annexed to the college building. It had one big hall on one part of the ground floor and another in the first. These halls were made into small rooms with man-high canvas partitions in wooden frames. Every resident was allotted one such room, a single cot, a small table with a table lamp, and a chair. Mine and Daipu's rooms were side by side in the ground floor hall. Next to Daipu's room or somewhere along the line was the room of another friend of our circle, Chitcho alias Chetu. Chetu is now a retired physician in the London. The other part of this building on the ground floor accommodated the chamber of the principal, the college library, and the college office. There were 2/3 multi-seated rooms for the hostel on this part of the building too. Our superintendent lived and held his chamber in a room facing the road near the entrance of the hostel. Further ahead of the superintendent's room was located our science laboratory in a separate building. St. Edmund's College was on a hillock just on the other side of a level field used as a playground behind our college-cum-hostel buildings. We always had an unwritten competition in various matters amongst the students of our college and those of St. Edmund's. In 2007, when I revisited the college for the first time, after my graduation from there, I found that the location of the college had changed. Our college was a co-education and cosmopolitan college ably administered by its principal, Reverend Father A. Joseph, a Carolite missionary. Father Joseph was reserved and had a strong personality but could be approached if needed. There were students from various linguistic and ethnic groups. Besides Bengalese, there were Anglo-Indians, Assamese, Khasis, Garos, Lusais, Nagas, Manipuris, and others. We had a very few girl students in our class as the girls normally were not interested in science subjects, in those days. There was an Anglo-Indian girl student, quite good-looking, amongst the girls. Our college had an eminent faculty in the science wing. The chemistry department was headed by Professor S.N. Pal, who was a great teacher and popular too. Professor Pal taught us inorganic chemistry. He had a distinctive method of teaching. He could present even the complex matters in the simplest way so that we could grasp them quite easily. I remember one simple instance of his simplified system of making one learn things by heart. In inorganic chemistry, periodic table is one of the toughest items to keep in memory. But he taught us this in such an ingenious way that it became difficult for me to forget it till I reached the last stage of my service life. For organic chemistry, we had Professor Rai Chaudhary. We had another talented teacher in H.L. Ray, Hiralal Roy, in the mathematics department. We learned from him the simplest procedures for solving mathematical problems. Sri Ray had a good command over the subject and could explain mathematical problems with clarity and in simple ways. We used to wait for his class as eagerly as we did for Professor Pal's in chemistry. But Sri Roy had been somewhat of an alcoholic and often failed to take classes. Professor M. Das was the head of the Department of Mathematics. But we hardly found interest in his classes. In the physics department, we had for some time a young South Indian Professor A. Rayu, who taught well, and generated much interest in us. Unfortunately for us, he did not stay long in our college. Professor Binoy Chakrabarty was the head of the Department of Physics and taught well. We had also Professor G. G. Swell, who later became the Speaker of Indian Parliament, as our professor, in English. He was a little forgetful. At times, he came to take our class when it was not meant for him. When pointed out, he would be leaving in haste expressing regret. Professor N. Martin Majah was another of our English professors and used to teach well. Both Professor Swell and Professor Martin belonged to the tribal community. Professor Gopal Day taught us Bengali. He had a stationery shop opposite our hostel. I have mentioned only a few of our faculty members. Unfortunately, I don't remember the others. The college had a system of continuous assessment through the monthly tests conducted regularly. At the end of the session, there would be a selection test for the next class, and then for the final examination. As Shillong is a hill station, we used to have winter holidays from mid-December until the end of February. In the final year, we had to stay back for a part of the winter holidays for special classes. The college authorities took special care of their students and arranged special classes for a selected group of final year students during the winter vacation. One of the students of the college, named Tapas Pal, had stood first in the university in the intermediate science examination in the very year I had entered the college. Tapas was the elder brother of one of our classmates, Tarun Pal, who later passed MBBS from Dibrugarh Medical College, and became a doctor. Tarun and his elder brother Tapas were the nephews of our Professor S.N. Pal. Both had passed the matriculation examination from Lakshmi Union High School, Horhat. Tapas had stood 7th in the matriculation examination in 1958. Tarun was a good friend of mine. We had also amongst us in the hostel another meritorious student, Deepak Bhattacharjee, who had been preparing for his final examination in the ISC the next year. He, too, in his turn, stood first in the university in the intermediate science examination in the year 1961. College authorities had great hopes in me and took special care to see that I didn't face any inconvenience in pursuing my studies. They expected me to complete the hat trick for the college in securing the first positions in the ISC. Reverend Father N.J. Kenny, an Irish missionary, ably superintended our hostel. He was also the vice principal of the college and taught English in the college. Hostel rules were very stringent. There were specified hours for breakfast, lunch, afternoon tea, and dinner. Bells would be rung calling the boarders to have food. At these specified times, for lunches and dinners the bells would ring twice. For dinner, it would be at 7:30 p.m. for the first batch, and then at 8:15 p.m. for the second batch. All the boarders had to be in the hostel by 6 p.m. A bell would ring at 6 p.m. to notify that it was time for them to move to their rooms. Thereafter, Father Kenny would go around in the hostel. He would knock on every door to make sure that the boarders were in their respective rooms and had sat down to study. Chatting or being in a friend's room during study hours was not allowed. If anyone had to stay out after 6 p.m., he had to take prior permission from the superintendent. After dinner hour was over, a bell would ring again for the boarders to move to their rooms. Father Kenny would be out on round again at about 9:30 p.m. knocking at every door to make sure that everyone was in his room, and there was no noise that could disturb others. Anyone found absent at that time for whatever reason had to report to Father Kenny immediately on his return to the room. Lights in the rooms of the boarders had to be put out after 10:30 p.m. At times, Father Kenny would roam around late at night with a torch in hand to ensure that everything was in order. It was under such strict discipline that I had spent my teens here. It had a great role to play in my later life. It had made me work-oriented, disciplined, and upright. I owe a great deal to this college, its hostel, and its faculty, more so, to Father Kenny for his love and care. He was a father figure, strict in discipline, but soft at heart. He was friendly and humorous too. Reverend Father Kenny, Reverend Father Joseph and the eminent faculty members of our times are no more. During my visit to the college in March 2014, I was happy to see that a new block of the college accommodating the Department of Fisheries Science was named after Reverend Father Joseph, who had been the principal at our times. It added to my pleasure when during my most recent visit to the college, February 2016, I came across a utility shop set up by the students in the name of Reverend Father Joseph in the precincts of the college. Coming back to our days, we used to roam around in the neighborhood of our college after the college hours, as our pastime. Sometimes, we also visited nearby restaurants in a group of 5/6 friends. We could not go far, we had to return to the hostel by 6 p.m. Sometimes, we just loitered in the vicinity of the hostel, enjoying the natural beauty, particularly when clouds came down to the level of the roads. At times and on holidays, we took permission to stay out late and went to Police Bazaar, the central location of Shillong. We had a shortcut to Police Bazaar from opposite our college. But we had to climb down or climb up many stairs to use it. It was a pedestrian path, and no vehicle could move on it. In 2007, when I visited the college for the first time since my graduation, I found that the stairs no longer existed, and the path had given way to a full-fledged one-way road, seen in the pic on the right, on which small vehicles and taxis were plying. Our college had been shifted to a new building by the side of this road near its lower end. It was down below in the very hill on the top of which it had been situated earlier. The hostel had moved into another new building near the college at a level little higher than it. It was connected to the college by a staircase. A new building was built in place of the wooden structure, which accommodated the hostel at our times at the old location of the college. This newly constructed building, together with our one-time college building, now housed St. Anthony's HS School. Later, I learned from the website of the college that the change of location of our college had taken place in 1984. Back to our days, at Police Bazaar, we visited restaurants, roamed along the Wards Lake, and enjoyed looking at beautiful girls. We had a friend from St. Edmund's College, named Rajarshi Bhattacharjee nicknamed Kisu, who lived at Police Bazaar down the alley leading to the polo ground. We often visited his house, where members of his family received us warmly. We had another friend, again from St. Edmund's, named Debasis Nandi, who had his girlfriend living next door to Kisu's. Debasis also used to be with us when we visited Kisu's house. Debasis was the son of an officer in the Directorate of Education of the Government of Assam and stayed near our college at Nongthumai. His elder sister Kumkum, too, was a student of our college, and senior to us. Debasis graduated in mechanical engineering from Yadavpur University and is reportedly now living in New Jersey, the USA with his family. Pradeep's cousin sister Kalpana Roy alias Gopa, also a schoolmate of mine, had been studying in Lady Keene College in the Police Bazaar area. She stayed in the college hostel there. Pradeep used to take me along whenever he went to look up his sister. Gopal later passed MBBS from Dibrugarh Medical College and became a doctor. Vacation and studies. I had got admitted to St. Anthony's College in the later part of September or the early October in the year 1960. Our first winter vacation was not far. We had more or less 2.5 months to attend classes before our winter vacation started. By the time we had our vacation, my parents and my brother had returned to Horhat. As the situation there had normalized, it may be recalled that we had moved to Silchar as Bengal Khedao movement gained ground in Upper Assam. My friend Daipo and I, therefore, left together for our common hometown as the vacation commenced. Possibly, Daipo's sister Gopa was also with us. We traveled by bus, first to Gulahati and then from there by a different bus to Horhat. This time, I could not enjoy the natural beauty along the GS road on the way to Gulahati as I fell sick with nausea, shortly after the bus had started climbing down the hills. I lay stretched on the last empty row of seats in the bus. My travel sickness on the hilly roads troubled me for a long time. I became free from it sometime towards the end of my intermediate course, when I got used to the journeys, in the hills. Anyway, I had a great time during the vacation. Rejoined my parents and brother after a continuous separation of a few months, and for a homesick boy till then, it indeed was a happy union for me. My teachers were glad to see me again. They blessed me and wished me success in life. A few of our school friends viz. Mrinal, Budpal, Harish were at Horhat. But I could neither find Toshitan nor could get her whereabouts. By now, I was convinced that she had left Horhat. I spent some time in the company of my school friends. I also helped my father in his day-to-day work in the press to the extent I could. As our vacation neared its end, Daipo and I left Horhat for Gulahati by train. On the way, between the stations Lumding and Shaparmakha, Daipo lost his suitcase. It was winter, and the journey was an overnight one. We were sleeping on the lower berth while the suitcase was kept on the bunk above us. When we woke up at Shaparmakha, we found the suitcase missing. We learned later that this stretch of the railway route was notorious for theft and snatching. Daipo had to buy new clothes on reaching Shillong. Incidentally, I myself, too, had once been a victim of a suitcase theft. That was when I was posted at Kalna. I was escorting my sister-in-law to Meekleganj. We entrained at Sealdah and were looking for our seats, keeping the suitcase on an upper bunk. By the time we could find our seats, the suitcase had gone. After the vacation, our classes started in full swing. It had taken me the first few days to settle my mind after having left the warmth of home. Gradually, I got adapted to the college and hostel life. I then fully devoted myself to my studies. In the course of time, my homesickness faded away under the pressure of my studies, and by virtue of the enjoyable company of my friends. The year was 1961, and we had to complete our course for the final examination, due early next year. We also had regular monthly tests to appear. So, there was no place for laxity. In the meanwhile, the result of the 1961 ISC examination was declared. Our hostel mate Deepak Bhattacharjee, of whom I have mentioned earlier, stood first in order of merit in the university, as was expected. It was now for me to secure the first position in the university next year to bring the glory of a rare feat of the hat trick to my college. I had additional reasons to be more concentrated in my studies. The college was bearing all my expenses, and I was duty-bound to give my absolute best to it. I also had a crying need to be better placed in life, for which it was necessary to do well in the examination. I fully devoted my time and energy to studies. Daipo and I also decided to avail of the later part of winter vacation and stay in the hostel for the first half of it to attend the special classes and maintain the momentum of study. We had, accordingly, a brief visit home in the later part of the vacation. During our extended stay in Cologne that vacation, 1962, sometime in early February, possibly February 3rd, the temperature had fallen below 0 degrees C and water had frozen in the pipes and the buckets. That was the only occasion in my 4 years' stay in Cologne that it had happened. It could amuse the readers to know that while in Cologne, we used to have a bath once a week during the summer and once a month in the winter to avoid the bite of cold. Taking a bath was something of a sort of ritual for us. We used to prefix the time and moved in groups. Result in the ISC examination, 1962. Our ISC examination was held in March-April 1962, and the results were declared in July. I ranked first in the university and obtained the highest marks in physics and mathematics. I also secured letter marks in chemistry besides physics and mathematics. The overall percentage of marks I had obtained was 85.1%. I thus completed the hat trick cycle for the college and fulfilled the expectations of my friends, teachers, and college authorities. The college authorities were exceedingly happy as their expectation came true. They awarded a memento to each one of us, who had secured the first positions in the 3 consecutive years starting 1960. I can't say if I could fulfill the wishes expressed in the memento, but I can certainly say that all my life I had tried my best to do my duties in letter and spirit. I was also given a cash reward of Rs 200. It was with this money my father bought me an Anglo-Swiss wristwatch. That was the first wristwatch I had in my life. It was my companion for many years thereafter. I replaced it towards the end of my service career when it became unserviceable. Entry to and exit from engineering institutes. A. Indian Institute of Technology, IIT, Kutgupur. While waiting for the result of the ISC examination, Daipo, I, and a few other friends sat for the entrance examination of the Indian Institute of Technology. Daipo was the prime mover in this matter. Selection for the B.Tech course in the IIT, in those days too, used to be made through an all-India written test followed by an interview for the selection of discipline. Amongst my friends who had applied for, I alone qualified in the written test and was called for the interview. I flew from Horhat to Calcutta, and then took a train to Kutgupur for appearing at the interview. That was my second air journey, and the first alone, in my life. If I remember correctly, the airfare was 60 rupees. The aircraft was the now abolished Dakota. The train fare from Howrah to Kutgupur by the second class by which I had travelled was 10 rupees. It was a locomotive train hauled by a Canadian coal engine. EMU coaches and electric trains had not arrived. I took a rickshaw from Kutgupur railway station to reach the institute at Hijli. I appeared for the interview at the institute. At the end of the interview, I was offered chemical engineering as my subject. I accepted the offer and got myself admitted. I was allotted a seat in Rajendra Prasad Hall of Residence for my stay. Later in the afternoon, I moved into that hostel. On that very night, I heard uproars in the nearby Nehru Hall. I learnt that this was in connection with the ragging of new students. Many had earlier told me of the severity of ragging by the seniors in IIT, Kutgupur. Due to the timidity of character I possessed in those days, I got very upset by this incident. I reasoned within myself throughout the next day, whether I should stay or leave. The fear of ragging was already there, but with that now came from deeper within, the sense of insecurity in the absence of steady family income. I questioned myself, even if I faced the ragging and stood up to it, where would my parents find the resources to meet the heavy expenditure to complete the course of engineering? My scholarship money could meet only a fraction of it, and the meager income of the family couldn't support any part of it. I failed to withstand the two-front attack. As darkness fell, I took a rickshaw and left for Kutgupura station. I stayed on the Kutgupura railway platform for the night and took a train to Calcutta the next morning. Thus, my timidity and financial handicap made me shut the door of IIT, Kutgupura, as did my poverty and diffidence in early teens prevent me from expressing my love to the person for whom love had grown in me. I recall, in this context, the words of American transcendentalist Ralph Waldo Emerson, who had said, "Do the thing we fear, and death of fear is certain," and which words had made me fearless in my later life. But I doubt if this principle could have helped me in the then prevailing situation if I had taken the plunge. Incidentally, later days events in engineering colleges and elsewhere have shown how many of the aspirants for engineering and medical sciences had their dreams shattered due to the malice of ragging. Some even succumbed to the injuries inflicted on them by the cruel method of ragging. Anti-ragging laws have since been enacted, and even implemented in some places, but the spite continues. From Calcutta, I returned to Horhat by train. The railway journeys from Calcutta to North Bengal, Guwahati, and beyond were quite hazardous those days. Firstly, there was neither sleeper berths nor reserved seats in the lower classes. Secondly, there was no bridge over the rivers Ganga and Brahmaputra, which fell en route. One had to cross these rivers by steamers twice to go to Guwahati and beyond. The railways provided ferry services to its passengers at Sakragali Ghat and Amanjayan for crossing the Ganga and the Brahmaputra, respectively. Passengers had to get down from the train at Sakragali Ghat, cross the river Ganga by the steamer and entrain on the other side at Manihari Ghat. At Manihari Ghat, there were a number of good food stalls offering steaming rice with curry of hilsa and other palatable fishes. Farther up, passengers traveling to Assam had to get down again at Amanjayan, cross the river Brahmaputra by the steamer and entrain at Pandu on the other side to continue the journey ahead. The railway tracks up to Sakragali Ghat was broad gauze, but beyond, it was all meter gauze. This was the first time I had undertaken this journey all alone and was a little bit apprehensive. I, however, reached my place safe and sound. B. College of Engineering and Technology, Yadavpur. On return from IIT, I learned at Horhat that my friend Dipo had got admitted to Yadavpur University in chemical engineering. As Dipo was there, I felt an urge to try for mechanical engineering at Yadavpur. Mechanical engineering was the most sought-after subject in engineering at that time. I thought of giving it a try by overstepping the bounds of finance. There was no joint entrance examination for admission to engineering colleges in West Bengal those days. As far as I remember, Yadavpur University did not also have any entrance examination of its own. Admission used to be on the basis of the results of the qualifying examination. With my result in the ISC examination being as it had been, it was not difficult for me to secure admission in the mechanical engineering department of the Yadavpur University. I also got an accommodation in the university hostel. I attended classes for some time, but then left the university as I could not concentrate on the subject due to mental conflict arising again out of our financial unsteadiness and a sense of insecurity in a distant land. That put an end to my study of engineering. Final destination for graduation: St. Anthony's College, Shillong. I went back to Shillong and got admitted to my old St. Anthony's College in the BSc course with Hans in mathematics, the other subjects being physics and chemistry. College authorities were gracious enough to extend to me all the financial concessions and facilities they had provided during my intermediate course. Being a national scholar, I also used to draw a scholarship of 85 rupees per month. However, for the first couple of weeks, I felt dejected for having left on my own accord renowned institutions of engineering, which were the craze for the students in those days. At times, I used to brood within myself if I had done the right thing. Being a sensitive person, I was also emotionally upset by the absence of old friends in the hostel. I used to miss my best friend Daipu a lot, particularly when traveling to and from home and on holidays in the hostel. Gradually, I reconciled to the situation, made new friends, and devoted myself to my studies. One of my maternal uncles, a cousin of my mother, whom we called Butu Mama, and of whom I have spoken earlier in the chapter on maternal uncles, came to stay in Shillong during this period. Butu Mama had taken the job of the manager in a hotel in Police Bazaar. Both the uncle and the aunt used to stay in the accommodation provided to them in the hotel itself. I had an open invitation from my aunt to have lunch with them every Sunday. I visited them at times and had lunch with them occasionally on Sundays. That was for me, a diversion of a kind, from the daily routine of studies. During the winter holidays and the Durga Puja, I used to visit my hometown, stay with the family, help my father in his work, and enjoyed the company of school friends, some of whom were still there. Toshita, for whom my heart craved, was, however, not there, nor could I have any news of her. In wrapping up the story of my life in Shillong, I must say that I had enjoyed my stay during the first 2 years, much more than that in the last 2 years. Result in the BSc examination, 1964. Thus, passed off 2 years of my BSc course. I appeared for the final examination in 1964 and passed in the first class with Hans in mathematics, I being the only student in the university to have secured the first class on the subject that year. I once again secured the National Merit Scholarship worth 110 rupees per month for my postgraduate course. I was thus a National Merit Scholarship holder from the matriculation to the postgraduate level. As earlier stated, I had also secured a scholarship in ME examination, which continued for 4 years until my matriculation examination. The cases have been the predominant race in the Kasai Hills, to which Shillong belongs. They have had a matriarchal society, like many other hill tribes, the mother was the head of the family. Most of the outdoor activities were conducted by their womenfolk. It was the women, who manned the fish and the vegetable stalls in the daily markets. They managed the retail shops for various commodities too. The males and the females from the lower stratum could be seen carrying loads. With the spread of education, these people of both the sexes started getting into white-collar jobs. Here too, the fair sex seemingly outnumbered their male counterparts. As for their attire, they were very conservative. Women had their bodies fully covered. It was learnt that they used 13 different pieces of cloth to dress up in their traditional costume. In our times, Shillong was a peaceful place, and the law and order situation was excellent. Later, it fell victim to the militancy like many other states in the northeastern region. The main militant outfits Hiniodorep National Liberation Council, HNLC, and AKIK National Volunteers Council, ANVC, became active, and Shillong became a disturbed area. These militant organizations were, however, proscribed by the Government of India and peace restored. Visiting places in and around Shillong. Shillong is known as the Switzerland of the East for its weather and scenic beauty. During my college days in Shillong, I had visited some of its beauty spots. Shillong had 3 well-known waterfalls: Elephant, Beaton, and Bishop. Of these, I had visited Beaton and Bishop. I, along with some of my friends, climbed down many stairs to the bottom of one of these falls to see how the frothing water, after falling on the ground, strewn with boulders and pebbles, was flowing in a gentle stream. The famous Ward's Lake is situated in Police Bazaar, the central location in Shillong. We visited it very often. This artificial horseshoe lake, set up in an astounding natural environment, has a great charm on its visitors. It is dotted with colorful flowers. It gives one the feel of a carpet when one sits on the grass on its sloping bank, ideally suited for gossiping, or reading a book on an idle afternoon. The lake is full of varieties of colorful fish, and is ornamented by a stunning wooden bridge over it. The bridge is also ideal for having an unobstructed view of the entire lake. The botanical garden, full of orchids and flora, is just beside the lake. The lake is named after the then Chief Commissioner of Assam, Sir William Ward, who had made the plan for the lake. Colonel Hopkins constructed this lake in 1894. It was said that a Kasai prisoner being bored with the penitentiary routine had dedicated himself to the work of construction of this lake. We once went to Cherrapunji, the place that used to have the highest rainfall in the world. It was a unique experience. Every now and then there were the rains and the sun coming in alternate phases. You couldn't move in Cherrapunji without having a raincoat or an umbrella with you. Even in such an interior place having a meager population, 10,086 by 2001 census, would have been around 5,000 at our times after accounting for intercensal increase. Ramakrishna Mission had established a unit of it to extend their services there to the people who needed help and health support. The mission had been there since 1931. We visited the revered mission. Decades later in 2016, when I revisited Cherrapunji in the month of February, there was no trace of rains, and the water sources including the waterfalls were all dried up or having a very thin stream of flow. Local people had reported that Cherrapunji had been without rain since September of year before. I had on a different occasion gone up to Daki bordering the district of Sylhet in the erstwhile East Pakistan. Sylhet was my place of birth. As I saw the outline of the district from a distance, emotion ran high in me. I felt like trespassing the border and moving inside to peep into my place of birth and early childhood. But that was, after all, not possible, and hence I returned with pathos in heart. When doing my undergraduate course, I had once traveled to Silchar by Shillong-Silchar Road for a distance of 218 km through a hilly terrain. It was an overnight journey. The road had been opened shortly before, and work was still in progress at some places. It was a hilly track, too narrow at places to allow two vehicles to pass side by side. Besides, it was raining as we moved ahead. Because of the inclement weather and the narrowness of the road, the journey was all the more risky, particularly at the stretches by the side of deep ravines. We were held up in traffic at a number of places. At the end of the journey I, however, reached my destination safe and sound. Postgraduate studies in Calcutta. By the time I completed my graduation, my timidity had gone, and homesickness had dissipated, though I continued to remain an introvert. I made a resolve to move out of Assam for my postgraduate studies and for greater exposure to the world outside. I came over to Calcutta and applied to the Calcutta University College of Science and Technology for admission in the MSc in Applied Mathematics. The classes in the college had started by then. I was told that it would take some time to decide about my admission. I did not, however, get any assurance that admission would be granted. I had earlier applied to the Ramjas College, Delhi for admission in the Master of Science course, and had received an offer from the college. Meanwhile, I was selected for admission in pure mathematics in Yadavpur University. Yadavpur University did not have the postgraduate course in applied mathematics. I preferred to stay in Calcutta and got myself admitted to Yadavpur University. I was allotted accommodation in the university hostel, within its premises. My friend Dipu, studying chemical engineering, was in the nearby new hostel where I, too, had stayed earlier in the course of my short stay as a student of mechanical engineering. I started attending classes and did so for some time, when all of a sudden, I got a letter from the secretary, University College of Science and Technology, Calcutta University, approving my admission in applied mathematics there. I had to change the institution and the university again. I got admitted to the University College of Science and Technology at 92, APC Roy Road. I got accommodation in the Calcutta University hostel at 49B, Hajra Road. It was the year 1964. I had to commute along with others a fairly long distance to attend classes in our college at APC Roy Road. I still remember, We used to take a bus on route number 33 running between Shetla and Pakpara in those days to go to the college. The fare from our hostel to the college, a distance of not less than 10 kms, was 10 paisa at that time. In the hostel, we had the actor Mrinal Mukherjee amongst us as a student of statistics. Mrinal was then in courtship with the daughter of a political leader of Calcutta. At that time, he also used to perform occasionally in jatras. While in the hostel, he had made his first appearance as an actor in the movie Shankabela. He took some of us along to view the film in the Ajayala Cinema Hall when it was released. Mrinal expired on May 7, 2019. I had not met him since leaving the postgraduate hostel. My roommate in the said hostel was Nishit Bera of statistics, a very simple boy from a village in Midnapuri. After long years, I had met Nishit once when I was posted in the backward classes welfare department, Government of West Bengal at the Writers' Buildings. Amongst my other friends in the hostel, were Bhuptosh Mandal of Midnapuri, Debajyoti Bhaumik, Amrendra Narayan Chakrabarti and Soumitra Chaudhary, all from Tripura. First time MSc examination skipped. I had joined Calcutta University Science College with much expectation that the faculty here would be outstanding. Calcutta University was then a world-class university with its historical fame of producing world-famous personalities in diverse fields. Such an expectation was not unfounded, particularly when I was taught by an excellent faculty in a renowned college in a much smaller city like Shillong. But I was disappointed. The mode of teaching here did not meet my expectations in general. Some of the teachers were more inclined to read out from their notes than explaining the subject matter in its proper perspective. I was not particularly accustomed to such a form of the lecture. Those of our classmates, who came from Presidency College or Yadavpur University, were better informed because of their advanced knowledge acquired during the 3-year degree course. We from outside the state were finding difficulties, more so for me because of my joining classes much late. I was finding it hard to follow lessons in classes as I did not have the track of what was taught earlier. Being an introvert and a new entrant from an outside university, I couldn't also find a friend with adequate knowledge to update me properly on topics taught earlier. I started losing interest, and as a result, often stayed away from classes in the company of some of my other classmates. There were some new subjects in the curriculum for applied mathematics. For want of proper introduction to these subjects, I could not find adequate interest in them. The glamour of city life also distracted my attention from studies to quite some extent. As a result, I found myself unprepared when the time came for the final examination. I decided not to appear for the examination this year but to do it the next year with better preparation. In spite of all that I have said above, I feel I had failed to give the very best of mine while studying the postgraduate here. This stinging pain I shall carry to my grave. I should not have lost control and fallen prey to the distractions of the city life. Anyway, before the examination started, I left for Delhi. That was my first visit to Delhi. It was the first and the last time in my academic career that I had skipped an examination. It remained a blot in my career. The year was 1966. In Delhi, I had stayed with a relation of Subrata Purkayastha, a friend of mine. That relation of Subrata had been an undersecretary in the government of India and used to stay in a mess. Subrata was one of our friends of the ISC from outside the hostel in St. Anthony's College. He stayed with his elder brother, who had been a police officer posted at Shillong at that time. Subrata was doing his undergraduate course in electrical engineering at Yadavpur University at the time I went to Delhi. Later, as an engineer, he served in various organizations including BHEL and finally, settled in Kolkata. After retirement, he had found me out through one of my colleagues, and we had met a couple of times after decades. Anyway, I returned to Calcutta after the MSc examinations were over and stayed in my old hostel. I started studying with renewed vigor so that I could appear fully prepared for the examination next time and succeed with honor. This plan was thwarted by the subsequent developments. I, however, completed my MSc while in service at Berhampuri, details of which have been given later while describing my service career. Parents relocate. By the time I had entered the university for the postgraduate studies, my brother had joined a college in Silchar as a lecturer. My parents had relocated to Silchar to live with my brother. My father, due to age and ailments, and in the absence of both myself and my brother, was unable to run the printing press he had established at Horhat. Business at the press had dwindled much earlier, as early as at the mid-stage of my intermediate course, for want of orders. Most of the printing orders in our press used to come from Mokachung and adjoining areas of the then Northeast Frontier Tract, NEFT. Due to the independence movement of the Nagas there, orders from those places had almost stopped. As a result, our financial condition reached the bottom. Earlier, Father used to move around to collect payments and procure orders while we managed the press. With my brother and I being away, it was no longer possible for the father to move out. Our business was small, and income from it was poor. It was already difficult to sustain the family itself with this income. As I was away from home at that time, I did not know how parents had then managed their livelihood. Father, therefore, had to close down the press to shift to brother's place to stay with him, pending the decision to sell, or run the press by some other arrangement. Later, my brother-in-law Rajni Mohan Roy, who had been staying at Horhat, tried to run it for some time. He could not, however, bring it to shape. Ultimately, it had to be sold out, but that was long after my father's death and my entry to service. The press had, however, been shifted by then back to the rented accommodation of Mr. Rakesh Das. Fickle-mindedness in selection of institutes and subjects. In every stage of my academic career after the matriculation, I had changed the institutions one after another, as also the disciplines, for one reason or another. For good or bad, all these decisions of changes were mine alone and influenced by none. My parents had their own limitations because of their low-level education, and my brother was also not much conversant with the available career opportunities to give me any well-thought-out advice. I, myself too, did not have any fixed aim in career. Yet, I had to decide for myself. The result was that I had gone for a particular discipline and/or an institute on my own, made the entry secure there, and then left it for one reason or another. My parents or elders had never reprimanded me for any of these actions of mine. They had always supported me and honored my decisions. I feel I should go into the reasons for frequent change of my mind those days, though it is too late now. The choices of institutions or courses I made were not as such wrong, but I could not stick to any of them. As I analyze, I find one of the main elements that had stuck to my subconscious mind and influenced my decision was the dire financial condition of the family. The unstable income of the family had played an active role in creating doubt in my mind as to whether it would be possible to complete the course in the chosen institution successfully. While going for the course, or the institute, I did not have any idea of its financial implication, nor did any of our family members have. This was also never discussed within the family. Once I entered an institute, particularly at the undergraduate level, and smelled its air, I realized that it would require quite a large sum of money to complete the course of study. I was at a loss as to how such a high cost would be met. My scholarship money won't suffice. Our family, too, was not in a position to meet the deficit. We were then almost in the state of living from hand to mouth. It was extremely difficult, if not impossible, for our family in that condition to spare extra money for my education anywhere outside the hometown. We did not also have any property, movable or immovable, by mortgaging or selling which, my parents could meet the cost of my education. In spite of all these, I had given it a fair try by continuing with mechanical engineering course for some time at Yadavpur University, but had to leave it finally as finance amongst others stood in the way. Government, banks, or corporate bodies did not have any known scheme at that time to finance the education of the meritorious students. The assistance from the authorities of St. Anthony's College provided me the wherewithal to move ahead first during my intermediate course, and later during the undergraduate study. Even during the postgraduate studies in Calcutta, when my brother was employed and had been bearing the lion's share of my expenses besides my scholarship money, I had to look for private tuition at times to tide over financial difficulties. This was in spite of my stringent way of living. I did not spend even a single farthing otherwise than on genuine needs, during my entire academic career and even later in life. It may be recalled in this connection that I had continued for 40-odd years with the wristwatch that had been bought with the award money from my college in 1962 till that watch became unserviceable in the last phase of my service career. I could have replaced it with a fashionable one any time after entering the service. That finance had been an impediment to my education was also mentioned by my father in a newspaper item of the Jugantar dated August 15, 1964, when it published my achievements in the examinations from middle school level to graduation. I did not, however, tell anyone in the family or outside anything about our financial handicap to continue the courses. I felt strongly against demeaning the family by bringing out its financial incapacity. I had always projected my lack of interest on the subject or my homesickness, as the reasons for deserting the institutes I had chosen. There is, however, no denial of the fact that my uneasiness to stay at a far-off place bereft of the known faces and my introversion had played a secondary role in creating a dilemma in my mind. All these factors together might have made me scared and forced me to change institutions in my post-metric days. All said and done, I feel, I had also been suffering from conflicting ideas on the career at the relevant time. But one thing is for sure. A closer look at these decisions for the change of institutions, which outwardly might appear to be acts of fickle-mindedness, would reveal that there were cogent reasons behind them. As I look back from where I stand now, I feel my decisions of those days could not have been different. For, in that case, the result could have been disastrous for me. If forced to leave a course midway for want of money, which was quite likely as evidenced from subsequent happenings, I would have no option left for establishing myself in life. The world has moved a long way since our time. A meritorious student today has many options to find finance for his or her education. One now needs only determination and craving to stand up in life. Prelude to entering service. When I was preparing for my Master of Science examination after having skipped it earlier, there occurred an incident, which completely turned the course of my later life. My elder brother was at that time a lecturer in economics in a college at Silchar, Assam. He had a mind to appear for the West Bengal Civil Services examination. At his desire, I had obtained a set of forms and prospectus for him for the said examination. Going through the eligibility criteria, I found that my brother had already crossed the maximum age limit of 24 years prescribed for that examination. I informed him accordingly, he could not go for it. Studying the syllabus, I found that it suited me well, and I was still within the prescribed age limit for the examination. I also discovered that it would be my last chance if I wanted to appear. I made up my mind, completed the forms, and applied for the examination. In due course, I appeared for the West Bengal Civil Services examination, 1967. I still had some months before my MSc examination. I continued with my studies for that exam with all seriousness. While doing so, and waiting for the result of the WBCS examination, I joined a girls' school at Baranagora as a part-time teacher, in mathematics. I served there for a couple of months. Much before this, during the second year of my postgraduate study, I had also taught for some time a student of the undergraduate course in physics. Result in the West Bengal Civil Services examination, 1967. Sometime after I had joined the Baranagora school as a teacher, I got a call letter from West Bengal Public Service Commission to appear for an interview. I appeared for the interview at Bhavani Bhawan, Calcutta, on the due date. Stalwarts like K.K. Sen, ICS, the then member Board of Revenue, P.K. Rukshit, the noted professor of chemistry, Principal Maulana Azad College, chairman of the commission were in the interview board amongst others. I had obtained more than 70% marks in the interview. There was no career advancement institution or coaching center to guide the candidates for such examinations in those days. I had not also made any separate preparation for this examination or the subsequent interview, except for the subjects of the general knowledge and the 5-year planning, which formed a part of compulsory subjects for that examination. I sat for the examination with the knowledge I had acquired that far in my academic pursuit. Yet, I had secured the first position amongst the successful candidates. This news of my ranking first in the civil services examination was brought to me by some of my postgraduate hostel mates. They came to me jubilantly carrying a copy of the newspaper that had published the result. I was happy that I could keep my record of ranking first in the examinations, untarnished that far. 1966–67, still in a fix in career selection. Once I came to know of this service, WBCS, I started searching openings for similar services. I came across newly introduced Indian Statistical Service, for which I still had the age. Though I was not very keen on getting into this service, I appeared for the entrance examination but could not qualify. It required somewhat in-depth knowledge of statistics. The Guwahati University did not have statistics in its syllabus for math, Hans. I was first introduced to this subject while doing my postgraduate in applied mathematics at Calcutta University. I could not complete cognition on the subject till then. Once, don't remember exactly when, I also appeared in an interview for management trainees in Bata Company. At some point in time, I also thought of going to the research line, but that was a flicker through the mind. Thus, I was still in a quandary about choosing my career. Age barred for the IAS. I could not sit for the All India Civil Services examination for entry to IAS and other All India and Central Services. By the time I came to know about IAS and became interested in it, I had already crossed the prescribed upper age limit at that time, 24 years as on the first day of August of the year of examination. After I had left the engineering institutes, I did not have any specific career in mind, though innovative research attracted me. I never thought of becoming a civil servant. I was not even aware of the existence of a career called civil services. This was possibly because of my small town upbringing and my family background, which I have already described. In those days, even in the middle-class families, particularly in the backward areas like ours, people were hardly conscious of available career opportunities, and most of them did not also bother about it. There was seldom any discussion on a career in the family or amongst the friends. Newspapers were rare in many households. Television had not arrived. Coaching centers for competitive examinations had not developed. The career information base was thus weak. Middle-class parents were, by and large, busy on earning the livelihood and did not have the time or the mindset to be concerned about what their children did. Children seldom got any guidance for choosing their career. Children, too, were not as career-minded as they are today. Most of them, like me, did not have any fixed aim in life. It deserves mention that even in Calcutta, where I had joined the postgraduate course, I had never heard any discussion about career or the civil services amongst my classmates or friends. In my case, I came to know of IAS and felt interested in it only after my postgraduate hostel mate, Bijan Saha, had made it, after having special coaching at Yadavpur University. Year after, another of our hostel mates, Pranab Roy, got through to the IAS in the same way. Yadavpur University had conducted a special course for the All India Civil Services examinations for a couple of years at that time. By the time Bijan became IAS, I had become overaged, and my option was closed. I had the merit and the capability, but time was not on my side. The first part of my life story, life as I saw it, ends here. The second part of it shall relate to my service career, the way I look at myself and my general observation on modern society vis-a-vis our traditional society. Thanks for taking time to listen and watch.